Hello everyone, welcome to the online international forum organized by Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, better known as KAIST. This is our very first international forum organized by the Global Strategy Institute at KAIST. I am Professor Hoon Son and I will be moderating today's discussion. Our forum is now live broadcast through YouTube, National Public TV, and Naver TV. And the recorded version of this forum will be later broadcast through Arirang TV. First, let me give you a brief introduction to the Global Strategy Institute, or GSI. Established in February 2020, the GSI is KAIST's representative think tank that aims to provide insight on global and national issues through our expertise in science and technology. The theme of today's discussion is COVID-19, especially focusing on global cooperation in the coronavirus era. This inaugural GSI forum invites global authorities in various fields to discuss the challenges that we are facing with coronavirus and to predict and prepare for the post-coronavirus era. Having said that, we have 5 special guests today who will give us our opening address and remarks. First, please let us welcome Sung-Cheol Shin, the president of KAIST, who will give us an opening address.
Hello, everyone. It is indeed my great pleasure to welcome you all. Thank you to the distinguished speakers for joining us from around the world. And I'd like to thank you to the participants, both online and offline, who are joining us today. Special thanks goes to the Prime Minister Se-Gyun-jung for spending time with us despite your important role as the head of the National Task Force responding to COVID-19. I'm very pleased to host this inaugural forum of a KAIST Global Strategy Institute, which we officially launched in February after years' preparations. The Global Strategy Institute aims to identify global issues proactively and help us make breakthroughs well aligned with a solid science-based policy. This forum will reflect ramifications of the political, socio-economic, and scientific challenges that this pandemic will bring about and how we can globally collaborate to overcome. I feel fortunate and privileged to discuss this very timely topic at the inaugural forum of the Global Strategy Institute with the world-renowned experts. I would like to thank Director Jong-ho Kim and his team for making this online forum possible. Distinguished guests, I join those of you who are still social distancing with a very heavy heart. We are witnessing epochal event. This is affecting entire world. In only 4 months, the pandemic outbreak has seen more than 2.5 million people around the world contract the disease. More than 170,000 people have lost their lives. The world will never be the same after pandemic. A single unknown virus is upending our daily lives. It will redefine the new world order and new governing norms. Every country is scrambling to deal with this crisis that has touched every aspect of our lives. Researchers are racing to develop vaccine. Universities are doubling down on their efforts to utilize online education. We should take care of socio-economic disparities. Otherwise, the crisis will worsen. Future global governance will be dominated by the power of science and technology. If we can implement efficient policies together with the troubleshooting technology for responding for future crises, we'll emerge stronger than before. You know, Korea is one of the fewest countries that has successfully flattened the curve of the coronavirus. Korea's crisis management policy characterized by fast testing, tracing, and treating has been recognized as a shining example in dealing with the pandemic crisis. This Korean model is a result of the collaborating, combining creativity of the private sector, public sector's strong infrastructure, and the full support of the citizens. Above all, without technological prowess coming from the competent R&D power of Korea, we could not achieve this impressive result. This pandemic reminds us how we are closely connected. Creative collaboration among the private and public sectors, along with the research university from around the world, will help shore up global resilience against the pandemic. We should work together to build a world of a growing prosperity. KAIST has been the fostering allied scientists and generating innovative R&D in Korea for past 50 years, and our innovation have made innumerable contribution to the national growth. With the opening of a Global Strategy Institute, KAIST has built a strong foundation for developing new global models. It is our vision that KAIST will continue to strive for the benefit of humanity. Challenge will continue to confront us. However, we'll overcome them. We'll respond with the efficient and transparent policies that are fully supported by innovative science and technology. I hope this forum will bring out very productive discussion that inspire all of us to build a new norm required for global future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Shin, for the nice introduction. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for supporting our GSI International Forum. So our next guest is Se-Gyun Chung, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Korea. Welcome, Prime Minister Chung.
Greetings, participants of the Global Strategy Institute International Forum 2020, and thank you, renowned scholars from all over the world, for joining today's forum. I want to thank the President of KAIST, Sung-Cheol Shin, and the President of KTB, Kyung-Hwan Sung, as well as everyone else who made this event possible. Humanity now faces a common crisis, COVID-19. The global consequences brought by COVID-19 are predicted to be far more serious and prolonged than we could have expected. In the present moment, where everything is uncertain, the cooperation of the international community is crucial. To combat the virus, we need to share information and rely on the strength of our connections, rather than retreating into nationalistic isolation. We have to move forward towards global access and solidarity. International cooperation will prove to be a decisive weapon for humanity that determines in the war against COVID-19. I would call this global social capital. Korea encountered many challenges in its early experience of COVID-19, predating that of other countries. Openness, transparency, democracy. I'm confident in these three core principles of Korea's battle against COVID-19. Korea has tested vigorously to confirm the cases and then traced their context as comprehensively as possible. While heading off controversy over the potential infringement of privacy, Korea kept the public apprised of the relevant information both domestically and internationally. As a result, we can cautiously hazard that the daily number of confirmed cases has now stabilized. Respected scholars of the world, we hope that Korea's disease control system and diagnostic expertise contribute to the end of COVID-19 in international society. More than 100 countries around the world have requested Korea's policy know-how and medical equipment, such as testing kits and protective gear. We will do our utmost to support them within our capabilities. Furthermore, we hope to see the international community resolve complex crises caused by COVID-19 through global cooperation. When a novel emergency strikes, we need a new strategy, and dialogue to that end needs to happen as soon as possible. I believe that the topic of today's forum, global cooperation in the COVID-19, can start that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Chung. Now we have pre-recorded welcome remarks by Tae-jung Ho, the mayor of Daejeon Metropolitan City.
반갑습니다. 대전광역시장 허태정입니다. 코로나19가 전 세계를 휩쓸고 있습니다. 지금까지는 겪어보지 못한 수준일 것으로 전문가들은 예측하고 있습니다. 전 세계가 함께 겪고 있는 만큼 우리는 함께 머리를 맞대고 돌파구를 마련해야 합니다. 코로나19 전과 후는 방역과 의료뿐만 아니라 우리 사회 전체에 걸쳐 큰 변화를 가져올 것입니다. 일부에선 이미 변화가 감지됩니다. 카이스트가 국제적인 기업, 단체 등과 마련한 이번 국제 포럼은 그런 차원에서 큰 의미를 갖습니다. 이번 포럼이 코로나19 극복과 포스트 코로나19를 위한 소중하고 의미 있는 글로벌 협력 방안을 이끌어내는 기회가 될 것으로 기대합니다. 2년 후 세계 지방정부연합 총회가 이곳 대전에서 개최됩니다. 주최 도시로서 우리 시는 UCLG 총회에서 전 세계 지방정부 지도자들과 함께 감염병 공동 대응을 위한 협력 방안을 모색할 것입니다. 다시 한번 이번 국제 포럼에 함께 해주신 여러분들께 감사드리며 세계적인 위기를 극복하기 위한 의미 있는 출발이 되기를 희망합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mayor Ho. Now we have our opening remarks by UB Sivan, the president of Technion Israel Institute of Technology. Welcome, President Sivan. Please feel free to start whenever you are ready. Yeah, I think we are having some technical difficulty. As you know, this is our first online forum, so we are having some problem. Okay, now he's back. Okay, welcome, President Sivan.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Honorable Prime Minister Chung, dear President of KAIST, Professor Shin, whom I realize shares with me a passion for nanotechnology, dear Vice President of Microsoft Healthcare, Dr. Lee, distinguished participants. It is a great honor and pleasure, except for the hour, which is here 3 o'clock in the morning, to address you. I want to thank GSI, the organizers, and especially Professor Kim for this unique opportunity. So, what have we learned to date from the COVID-19 crisis? First and foremost, that we are all part of the same human tapestry, that our very existence, no matter where we live, no matter what we do, is woven together with the lives of billions of others around the world. This is obviously not new. We depend on each other for many other reasons, such as global warming, food shortage, water supply, and many other issues. But those threats are somewhat abstract. They relate to the distant future and many times to deprived populations. COVID-19 is very different. It is here. It affects us all, regardless of nationality and social strata. It affects our economies and financial security everywhere, instantly and very painfully. There are two opposing options to choose from. The first is seclusion, blaming COVID-19 on globalization, open borders, extensive travel, and the flatness of our world, as Thomas Friedman calls it. The other alternative is just the opposite. Humanity is faced with a common challenge, so let us work arm in arm to tackle it. We at Technion here in Haifa, Israel, have voted loudly and clearly for the latter option. Taking advantage of the spirit generated by the COVID-19 pandemic and the great advancements in massive electronic communication across continents and cultures, we have chosen to reach out to other universities, other research institutions, and industry. We believe that the COVID-19 crisis has brought along with its hardship ample new opportunities in education, domestic and international scientific collaborations, and new faster lanes to commercialization. And proof is everywhere. The Technion went from frontal to online teaching in just 1 week. And a recent survey among students shows remarkable 97.5 rate of satisfaction. Not only teaching, but also administration, meetings, discussions, everything has gone online. A feat that would have taken months, if not years, under normal conditions. And then new opportunities present themselves. Access to remote communities, joint courses, joint projects, even joint degrees with other universities overseas. The technology obviously existed before COVID-19, but the crisis forced us to cross a mental barrier, and that alone opens new horizons. Scientific collaborations have also been boosted dramatically since the present crisis began. Traditional barriers between disciplines, institutions, universities and hospitals, and industry were instantly removed in the face of a common enemy, a common target. Within 5 weeks, nearly 50 labs around our campus in Haifa diverted their research to COVID-19. Many of these new research directions were conceived in interaction with hospitals, other research universities, and industry. IP walls that block collaborations for years came down, and the rate of technology transfer to industry, as well as the establishment of new startup companies, has grown dramatically. Suddenly, solutions to IP conflicts are sorted out within days rather than months. No doubt, this little vicious virus has pushed us all out of our comfort zone into new territory where bold moves are made possible. Time will tell how long these changes will last, but I truly believe that this spirit of collaboration and cross-fertilization will stay with us beyond the present crisis. And then there are other psychological effects that will affect both KAIST and Technion. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated once more the importance of science and technology, especially as far as human health is concerned. Life science, medicine, and their related engineering and data science fields will undoubtedly take center stage, impacting other, less pressing areas. So as we see, despite the devastating impact on the economy, I believe that the present crisis also opens up remarkable new opportunities to be seized. The present conference is therefore timely, and I congratulate the organizers and the contributors for their visionary endeavor. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you very much, President Sivan, for joining us. So our last speaker for the opening remarks is Peter Lee, the Corporate Vice President of Microsoft Healthcare. Welcome, Vice President Lee.
Offline viewers, the online participants, and the speakers to the first International Forum of the Global Strategy Initiative, or Institute, and this one on global cooperation in the coronavirus era. I'm honored to join you on this virtual forum and would like to give my deepest thanks to KAIST and the Global Strategy Institute for inviting me. The timing of this inaugural forum is extremely important. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said over 100 years ago, competition has been shown to be useful up to a certain point and no further. But cooperation, which is the thing we must strive for today, begins where competition leaves off. If FDR were here today, he would undoubtedly be saying the same thing again. The question, of course, is what are the most important areas for global cooperation in the science and technology response to COVID-19? I'd like to concentrate my remarks on three areas. First is the area of medicine and healthcare, and especially the medical research that underpins this. Today, the research community around the world is racing for better tests and diagnostic tools, better drugs and therapies, and of course, vaccines. And what is so important is that today, artificial intelligence and machine learning, coupled with the availability of massive computing power, enables new approaches to drug discovery and vaccine discovery and development that weren't feasible even just 5 years ago. Now, that AI is, for the most part, powered by data. And so in medicine and in healthcare, we can see that a tangible path to global cooperation is in creating open data sets that can accelerate collaboration and discovery. The second area of cooperation is in public health and prevention, which suddenly has become central to the protection and functioning of all societies around the world. Like medicine, public health today has become transformed in ways that make it completely dependent on data for tracking patient impact, for tracking healthcare utilization, healthcare response capacity, and more. And in our global context, we need a global view of these data elements, and thus the standardization of public health data has emerged as a critical component for the future. And then, of course, the third area is life and the economy in a COVID-19 world. How can we enable people to go to work, to go to school, and to live full lives? Until we have a vaccine, people will need to understand, what is my risk today if I go shopping, if I go to my workplace, if I go to school? Answering such questions enables people to make informed choices. But to do that requires data that is shared so as to get population scale views and models that feed back into those personal risk assessments. So you can see in all three of these areas, in medicine, in public health, and the economy, that we have a dependence on data today. Data is the foundation of global cooperation, and for that cooperation, data must be open, standardized, and shared. For this and a whole host of other reasons, today Microsoft announced the launch of an open data campaign designed to close the digital data divide for organizations and people around the world. We've committed to creating 20 new data collaborations in key areas, including and especially coronavirus response. We live in remarkable times. Today, we live in a pandemic that happens once in 100 years. But unlike 100 years ago today, we have remarkable technologies that can turn data into knowledge, and into the power to bind people around the world to collaborate cooperatively. I see this as the important purpose of this international forum, and would really like to thank and congratulate KAIST and the Global Strategy Institute for putting it on. 감사합니다. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. One last time, I would like to thank all the speakers for the opening address and remarks. I hope that we can all work together to overcome this coronavirus crisis. Now, let us move on to the keynote speeches. The first speaker is Dr. Aunu Bernahu, the head of Global Health and Healthcare at the World Economic Forum. So Dr. Bernahu, thanks for joining us online today. I know that it's very early in the morning over there. So just for your information, now our forum is live broadcast through YouTube, Korea National Public TV, and Naver TV. So Dr. Bernahu, please tell us about the WEF's perspective on the global coronavirus action platform.
Thank you very, very much, and I really appreciate the invitation. Thanks to KAIST and the Global Strategy Institute. That's my true honor to be with you today. I don't know if you're seeing my screen. Let me share it.
Okay, I think, yeah, now I think we can see. And I think actually we are controlling from outside instead of you controlling. So I think if you want to go to next page, I think you have to let us know.
If you don't mind. And by way of introduction, my name is Arnaud Bernard. I'm the head of health and healthcare for the World Economic Forum, an organization I joined 7 years ago. And to start with, on this slide number 2, I'd like to tell you maybe a little bit more about what the World Economic Forum is doing and why we think I'm very inspired by the comments from my good friend Peter Lee just before. The topic of collaboration has to supersede the one of competition in those days and age. The forum has been founded in 1970, did celebrate its 50th anniversary in Davos this past January. And it's very striking that after Davos ended on the 24th of January, immediately we entered this era of a response where the forum is duly involved. Just a little bit about the forum. The forum is an international organization. It's defined as such under the Swiss law. It holds the same status as the International Committee of the Red Cross, to take an analogy. It's neutral, funded by partners, and rooted into the basis of multilateralism principles for the past 50 years. The forum engages with, say, 1,000 of the largest companies on earth. But not only that, it's also an organization that connects governments, civil society, young leaders, emerging innovators, global shapers, and not last but not least, and that's where we're so pleased to partner with KAIST Academia. Forum is non-for-profit, it's neutral. It's also a place that has evolved progressively from a convening place to a coalition shaping place. And the time for shaping new coalitions and new cooperation mechanism has never been so important. Just to reflect on the field of healthcare, which is mine, I'd like to remind the estimate audience that the forum has an history of catalyzing defining coalitions for the past 20 years. The forum was at the origination of the launch of the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization in 2000. This is where the first pledge was announced, as supported at that moment in time by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In 2002, the Global Fund emerged from another one of those Davos meetings. And a defining moment was in 2017 when the Coalition for Epidemics Preparedness Innovations was launched. CEPI has an immense role these days because, as you probably know, CEPI has been tasked to innovate in the field of vaccines, and with a budget of approximately 800 million at inception, it was able to actually catalyze the initiation of 10 COVID-19 candidates in a very short period. I'd like to mention that the first vaccine being tested in human, which is an mRNA vaccine developed by a company by the name of Moderna in collaboration with the NIH, is a program that was funded by CEPI. And there are 9 other such candidates currently in development. Since the end of the Ebola crisis in 2015, our forum did support a number of working groups meant to organize better response to epidemics and pandemics. The pandemic supply chain network was established to match demand and available supply. It's still in effect, it's still in existence in support of WHO. Those teams are regrouping more than 60 logistics and PPE providers and actually working diligently in support of the World Food Programme and the World Health Organization in the matching of supply and demand. Since 2017, we have run a number of simulations, pandemic simulations of all kinds. The first one was run in Davos, the last one was run actually in October of 2019 with the Johns Hopkins Center and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think we can move into the next slide.
Yeah, Dr. Bernal, just for your information, actually you can control your PPT. Can you try?
Okay. Okay, let me
Okay,
do that.
perfect.
Is this okay?
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. So those initiatives have been ones of the past. Now the question is, what do we do today? And it's eminently clear, as exemplified on this very, very complex map on the right of the slide, that the number of constituents and subject matters that need to be coinciding in support of an efficient response are more than one organization can mobilize alone. Our action is about coordination of business, multi-stakeholder collaboration at scale and speed. Moving into the next slide, what this has meant for us is that approximately 5 weeks ago, the forum has launched the COVID Action Platform, which is a unique coalition to address the crisis with 3 main priorities. The first one is to galvanize the global business community for collective action, making sure this business is going to feel as one community, with a second goal that is to protect livelihoods and facilitate business continuity. We absolutely worry that business discontinuity, the breakage of supply chains, the emerging unemployment levels are going to actually create more collateral damages than the effect of the disease itself. And last but not least, we have solicited our constituents to actually mobilize cooperation and business support in response to the crisis. What this means is that we have opened our collaboration platform pretty much broadly, not only to our partners, but to every companies on earth, to actually offer collaboration projects and initiatives that they can mobilize and animate and lead on our platform. The COVID Action Platform is in a way an ecosystem enabled by IT technology and connection tools to actually run projects. And I will tell you about a few of them that have emerged. I'm saying a few of them because since we launched the platform, we have received no less than 100 proposals for initiatives. And the first one that we were very proud to catalyze were the ones about the stakeholders' principle in the COVID era. was pretty much launched by Brian Moynihan, as the chair of our International Business Council and also the CEO of Bank of America, delineating a number of principles in support of employees, in support of suppliers, customers, consumers, governments, and shareholders. That pledge, that was originally signed by 5 prominent CEOs, I've ever seen been endorsed by hundreds of companies. When I say hundreds of companies, this is because more than 750 organizations across the globe have joined the COVID action platforms. At this point in time, more than 30 projects, this slide is a little bit outdated, more than 30 projects are accessible online on our World Economic Forum platform for our constituents to actually learn about those various initiatives, connect and lead. So I would really encourage the audience to actually access that World Economic Forum top link platform online, fully available, to actually scrutinize the type of initiatives that are being publicized, knowing that they are open for total inclusion and collaboration and involvement. So we have moved from dialogue to identifying the key champions and the influencers, like I've just discussed, Bank of America, to building coalitions, and coalitions which we hope will help deliver impact at speed and scale. This is a type of environment that you would find when you get onto our top link World Economic Forum online platform. This is a type of projects that are being publicized or exemplified. Every one of those projects is regrouping a number of community partners or non-community partners in support of one particular topic. The one that is being circled in yellow is worth spending a few minutes. And it is about implementing non-pharmaceutical interventions against COVID-19 in Africa. This project emerged from an original connection with a large NGO by the name of Resolve for Saving Lives, which is, as you may know, an organization largely so funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The problem is that Resolve for Saving Lives, that is having a very strong footprint in Africa, realized very early in the crisis that social distanciation measures, as effective in China or in Europe or in America, are not going to work in Africa. When people have no fridge, it's virtually impossible to tell citizens that they should not go to markets. So you need a totally different sets of measures. You need to also understand the type of measures that are tolerable or acceptable or followable from a cultural dimension point of view. Lifestyles and livelihoods are to be considered when new guidelines are being set. Also, it's very difficult to track the effectiveness of those measures. That's where we managed to connect very early this particularly remarkable NGO, Resolve for Saving Lives, with one of the leading survey and social media analysis, Ipsos, that global leading intelligence firm, and the African Center for Disease Control. And I'm very proud to report that after only 3 weeks of work, more than 40 nations have been interviewed, large samples of population samples, leading into the establishment of guidelines for NPIs for Africa for more than 40 nations. In turn, we have also seen our partners develop and deploy the tool to actually, based on social media understanding or based on utilization of apps, geolocalization and geopositioning, and also the privately organized and privacy respectful monitoring of cell phones, ways to actually monitor how those solutions and guidelines are going to be implemented. So this is in progress, this is in motion. And I'm very proud also to say that this partnership is currently considered for actually replication in areas like Latin America. Another thing that we realized very early, because our partners were actually donating a lot of products, we had a very large donation from Unilever on soaps and sanitation material. We had ones from AstraZeneca donating 8 million masks to benefit some European nations. We realized very early that there is not such a thing as a marketplace to connect supply and demand. And this is something that WHO has been struggling with in a way. That's where, when AstraZeneca donated those 9 million masks, we understood also very early the need to actually build that connectivity platform that connects supply and demand. And at this point in time, with 4 partners, we are engaged very deeply in the process of building that donation management platform with companies like A.T. Kearney or Microsoft in support of WHO. Last but not least, social sector mobilization has been a strong area of focus for the forum. That's where the West Africa Private Sector Coronavirus Platform has been emerging, working in 19 countries to actually mobilize civil society at large to address the vulnerability of communities in the region, in a way in the form of 19 country hubs. So I think in a nutshell, the COVID Action Platform is about connecting civil society actors, innovators, philanthropic innovators, cultural leaders, global shapers, but also private sector companies in the lead-up of defining initiatives. I think that's going to be extremely important, because when we think about the new normal and then switching gear to the field of healthcare, the key conditions for controlled transitions will be about, point number 1, having evidence that COVID-19 transmission is controlled. Point number 2 is going to be about making sure that when we reopen portions of the economies of subsectors, there is sufficient health and medical capacities in place. We will need to also, point number 3, ensure that outbreak risks in special settings are minimized. And we have seen in many nations that special settings include senior living facilities. Point number 4, we will need to find technology ways to actually manage importation cases. And finally, communities will be engaged. Those 5 areas are perfect areas for acceleration of collaboration and public-private collaborations. Let me take the particular example of the field of vaccines, because we know ultimately the end of the crisis will need a vaccine. At this point in time, we see that there are close to 100 vaccine candidates being developed globally. Multiple platforms, very diverse, require bold new approaches. What if there would be a moonshot for accelerating vaccines? When we are used to developing vaccines in decades, where we see that the best timelines are in number of years, let's say 18 months to 2 years, what would this take to actually develop a vaccine in 8 months or 10 months? It would take a radical transformation of the discovery process, bold new approaches, larger phase 1 studies, protecting people for the safety risks, but in turn allowing for collapsing phase 2 and phase 3 into one. In a paradigm where you would advance also manufacturing scale-up in parallel to the clinical development pathways. This would need funding, but this would need also a broad new ecosystem of partnerships where regulators would actually sit at the same side of the table as manufacturers and researchers finding solutions to actually innovate new clinical protocols. And last but not least, a lot will be about the funding. And this is where, at the World Economic Forum, we will stand behind a pledging moment that has been announced by the European Commission to actually mobilize a number of nations to actually provide for funding in large amounts to actually accelerate the development of therapeutics, vaccines, and diagnostics. So this is where I would like to end my keynote remarks. In a way, those moments in time have never been more important for collaboration. It's very important in the field of science and technology, and I wish that the forum that is going to continue in the next hours will duly address the opportunities ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Dr. Bernal, thank you for your insightful speech. Now, let us move on to our second speaker, Dr. Jerome Kim, the Director General of the International Virus Institute. Welcome, Dr. Kim. It is a great pleasure to have you with us today. Please tell us about the status of vaccine development for COVID-19 and other viruses.
안녕하십니까, and good morning to all the other speakers, and thank you very much for this opportunity to speak in the 2020 Global Strategy Institute Symposium. I'd like to first, let's see. Sorry, there we go. So this is a talk on the vaccine development for SARS-CoV-2. Can we ever return to the old normal, which was hinted at by the previous speaker. This brings up actually a cartoon from the time when I was working on an AIDS vaccine. But you know, the idea that a pandemic can strike anywhere, has a network across the world, and its only purpose is to kill, really sounds like a common and global enemy. And so in 1983, it was AIDS. But the world has faced other pandemics before. In 1562, the Black Death, smallpox from 3,000 years before the Christian era and the current era to 1979, when it was eliminated by vaccination. Cholera, the Blue Death, 7 global pandemics. We're in the midst of the 7th global pandemic of cholera. The Spanish flu in 1918 to 1919. And finally, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. So we've seen this before. This will not be the last. And as with everything, the preparation and the lessons learned from this pandemic hopefully will inform our response in future pandemics. This is so being a scientist, I have to show you at least one phylogeny slide and an introduction to the coronaviruses. Coronaviruses are viruses that affect primarily mammals. They are RNA viruses. And many of us remember the SARS outbreak of the early 2000s. Well, SARS-CoV and SARS-CoV-2 share about a 79% sequence homology. So they're genetically very similar. And this is down to 72% though in the spike protein. But again, still a remarkable similarity between the SARS-1 coronavirus and the SARS-2 coronavirus. Scientists who do sequencing have identified 8 circulating strains of the coronavirus containing only 11 mutations in a genome of 30,000 base pairs. This means that the mutation rate is 8 to 10 times lower than would normally be seen with influenza virus. And you can see the cartoon at the bottom shows the various genuses of the coronavirus family, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. The SARS-CoV-2 falls in the beta coronavirus family. Before we proceed with vaccine development, we have to understand what we don't understand. And I think the first and biggest question, 4 months into this pandemic, we still don't know whether infection provides immunity from future infection. Now, I think most of us believe that, yes, this is the case. And why would this be important? Well, first, in a classical vaccine disease model, for instance, hepatitis A or polio, although the disease runs a variable course and has different outcomes in different people, almost all people recover completely. So if you had rubella or influenza, after your period of illness, you would recover and you would be protected against reinfection by that same pathogen or organism. The vaccine-induced immune response, that is the protective response that is induced by the vaccine, which is a part of the natural immune response, clears the virus completely. And this is actually a very critical point. And I think that this is, again, one of the reasons why we think COVID-19 is going to be one of these viruses. Those people who become infected with COVID-19 in general clear the virus over time. And it may take 10 days or 14 days or sometimes 28 to 30 days. But as you sample for virus, we can no longer find it. So it appears that the body's defensive system can mount immune responses, defensive responses that clear the virus completely. And that is really important because what we want the vaccine to do is exactly the same thing. How long, and this raises a second question, which is a corollary. If it does provide immunity, how long will that immunity last? Will it be like some infections that give you lifelong immunity? Or will it be an immunity that fades over time and makes one susceptible again to reinfection? The second big question is what immune responses are important to clearing that infection. And this is really critical for people who develop vaccines because we want the vaccine to mimic those immune responses. We want the vaccine to make protective responses, that is, generate infection-fighting proteins called antibodies and killer T cells and other T cells that help killer T cells and antibody-producing cells to make the protective responses quickly, efficiently, and effectively. The next question, and this comes up frequently, it's still a big question in the HIV field, for instance, what is the appropriate animal model? And the picture on the right shows a monkey and a mouse, and this gets to one of the old sayings in vaccinology, that mice lie, monkeys lie some of the time, only humans tell the truth. So as we're doing testing in animals, we're looking to see whether these candidate vaccines that are still in the laboratory, and there are a lot of them that are still in the laboratory, whether these vaccines are actually making the kinds of protective responses that would potentially make a good vaccine that would protect humans who are exposed to SARS-CoV-2. And we really need to define this animal model. We don't really have one. We have animal models set up in mice, in hamsters, in ferrets, and in monkeys, but we don't know which one will actually predict the things that we will see in humans. For instance, if a vaccine protects a monkey against SARS-CoV-2 infection, it makes us feel better that that vaccine will likely protect humans against the same infection. And the final issue, and this is something that all people who develop vaccines really take to heart. What's shown on the left is a picture from the first vaccinations against smallpox. And you know that smallpox is one of the 2 diseases in the world that was eliminated by vaccination. But there was a lot of unreasonable fear when smallpox vaccine was initially introduced. And so in the picture on the left, you see people who are getting vaccinated and all of a sudden sprouting cows from their arms because the smallpox vaccine was actually a vaccine derived from cowpox, which is a related virus that confers protection against smallpox. But really for us, are there any safety issues? And really, we can only know this after we've done studies in humans. We've made sure that the vaccine is safe in initial testing, safe in extended testing, and then once we have a vaccine that we know is safe and effective, will that vaccine continue to be safe and effective years after the initial vaccination? So there's a lot of work that companies and research institutions like IVI do in order to ensure that the vaccines that we develop are safe and effective. So the 2 next questions that often are asked is how much is this going to cost and how long will it take? So there have been lots of estimates. And I think Sir Andrew Whitty, who's actually now part of the WHO leadership group for the COVID-19 vaccine development effort, once kind of joked that billion-dollar estimates are one of the great myths of the vaccine industry. But actually that has some basis in reality. A study done by the Gates Group suggested that vaccine development costs between $400 million to $1 billion. The timeline, 5 to 10 years, that was mentioned earlier, under usual circumstances. the failure rate. And again, this gets to one of the reasons why vaccine development is so complex. 93% of those things that start off in the laboratory as maybe vaccine candidates are failures. They don't make it into the market. Only 7% of the vaccines that start in preclinical development, in animal studies, in the laboratory, are eventually licensed. So really you have a 1 to 10 success rate, and you're spending $1 billion. And companies are often wonder, is a vaccine worth developing? I think for COVID-19, we have very clear evidence that development of a vaccine will be critical not only to protect the lives and health of people around the world, but the world economy will critically depend on us being able to return to the things that we did before COVID-19. So this actually is a quick slide, but it's actually fairly complicated. The schema, the figure on the left is actually the virus. The blue club-shaped particles are what we call the spike protein. The spike protein is very important because the infection-fighting proteins called antibodies, which neutralize the virus, appear to target this spike protein. So if you were going to develop a vaccine, you'd want that vaccine to develop strong binding antibody responses and neutralizing antibody responses against the spike protein. And what's shown in the middle with the figure that says receptor binding domain is a three-dimensional structure of the trimer of the spike protein. From that, we can derive a number of potential experimental vaccines. And at this point, they really are experimental. When you look at the list of 115 different candidates, the vast majority of them, roughly 100 to 110, are still not in humans. They're still being developed and tested in the laboratory. But you can see the different types of vaccines there. Vaccines made from RNA, vaccines made from DNA. Those are the two nucleic acid vaccines. They can be they can be developed and manufactured fairly quickly. There's an accelerated pathway to move them into humans. And so it isn't a small wonder then that Moderna, an RNA vaccine company, was one of the first, and Inovio, a DNA vaccine company, was a close second in terms of getting vaccines into the clinic and beginning initial testing in humans. But we're also pretty good at developing things called vectored vaccines. And so when you listen to Professor Adrian Hill from Oxford or Professor Sarah Gilbert talk about their simian adenovirus-based vaccine for COVID-19, that is a vectored vaccine. Probably the most common type of old-fashioned vaccine, and we see this with the influenza vaccine or with certain types of polio vaccine, is just to take the virus, grow it up, and kill it. And use that killed virus, we call it an inactivated vaccine, as the vaccine itself. It's easy to do. It's a technology that may be relatively quickly transmitted around the world and duplicated in various conditions, assuming that technology transfer and quality can be assured. The last category are live attenuated vaccines. Live attenuated vaccines take a little bit longer to develop, but what we know is that the immune responses to live attenuated vaccines tend to be stronger and longer lasting. So ultimately, in the end, maybe a live attenuated vaccine is something that we need, but it may take a bit longer to develop one that is both safe and effective. What's shown in the far right are the list of things that you have to keep in mind when you're developing a vaccine. Now, what we often say is, a vaccine developer always begins with the end in mind. The end being, we want a vaccine that's used, that's highly effective, that reduces the burden of disease and suffering around the world. In order to get there, and in order to get there efficiently, the process that normally is in place takes 5 to 10 years. Imagine now that we are going to compress it to 12 to 18 months, and all those things that are listed on the right side of the slide have to be done efficiently and completely in 12 to 18 months. And it's a daunting task. People use the word unprecedented a lot when they talk about this process. It will be unprecedented. To start from scratch with a brand new pathogen to develop a vaccine in 12 to 18 months will be unprecedented. And 12 to 18 months is the timeline if everything works. This is the pipeline itself. And you can see as of April 8th, there were 115 candidates. 78 are actively being pursued. There was not enough information on the remainder. The vast majority of them are preclinical, that is, not yet in humans. And you can see the confirmed and unconfirmed, the ones in advanced preclinical stage, so that they're actually doing animal studies now, and then the ones that are now being tested in humans. And these are the vaccines that are being tested in humans. So Moderna is an RNA vaccine company. Inovio is a DNA vaccine company. And you can see both of these are relatively small trials. N equals 45 means that 45 volunteers will participate in this trial. N equals 40 means 40 people will participate. The Jenner Institute's trial is a little different. It's starting with a much bigger number, an N of 510. Its trial is designed to compress phase 1 and phase 2 of vaccine development. So vaccine development typically has 3 phases, labeled phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. Phase 1 is to look primarily at safety, with a little bit of a look at the immune responses generated by the vaccine. Phase 2 is a really in-depth evaluation of the vaccine in its target population. Does it make the responses we think it should make in its target population? So in adults from 18 to 60, or if this were a vaccine for children, in progressively lower age groups until we reach infants, and show that the vaccine works in infants. So again, it's a stepwise process designed to emphasize safety, but also to get us the information we need before making a decision to move into phase 3. Phase 3 trials tend to be thousands of people. They're much more expensive. They can be more complex, and they really should be undertaken to ask the question, does this vaccine work? Does it protect against infection, protect against disease, and is the vaccine safe? So the Jenner Institute is a much larger trial. CanSino, which is a Chinese company, has already enrolled its 108-person phase 1 trial, and phase 2 was announced to be starting a couple of weeks ago. But I don't have any more information on the CanSino product. It is based on an adenovirus, adenovirus 5. The Beijing Institute of Biological Products has a whole inactivated vaccine in alum, and that trial started last week. So all of these companies have products in early stage testing, with CanSino potentially having started phase 2 not so long ago. IVI, in conjunction with the company Inovio and with funding from the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, hopefully will be starting a phase 1/2 clinical trial in Korea. That the announcement was made a week ago. What you see here are the high-level timelines for such a project. In this trial, we would use a new form of introducing the DNA into human volunteers called electroporation. It's actually not that new. Actually, in conjunction with other companies, Inovio and others in Korea have been using a similar device to test a MERS vaccine. MERS is a different coronavirus. What you can see here is the high-level design of that study, which hopefully will start in June. So again, I emphasize that vaccines, in addition to being safe, effective at preventing disease and infection, also have to be safe. And one of the key questions is something that actually doesn't come from anything we know about COVID-19, but from its cousin, the first SARS virus. What was found there is that there was a unique circumstance where if they challenged certain animal species with, say, whole inactivated vaccines, that they sometimes, and it predictably, saw protection against infection, and that's seen here. The mice actually do very well if they're vaccinated and then challenged with the original, with what I call SARS-1 vaccine, SARS-1 virus. They're protected. The vaccine does what it's supposed to do. What was unusual was, and also they found that if they used an adjuvant, a substance that's added to the vaccine, to the whole inactivated vaccine, that they saw much higher protective, neutralizing antibody responses against the virus, which is great. But the other thing that they saw, which was a little disturbing, was that they saw an excess number of a different kind of cell called eosinophils in the lung of the mice that were vaccinated. And you can see the electron micrograph, the photomicrograph on the left, highlighting the little arrows are eosinophils, which are somewhere where they're not supposed to be. So this is the kind of question that arises when you're developing vaccines and when you're using animal models to develop vaccines, because every animal model is different. This is a summary of all the studies that have been reported, and this is data that has been collected by a number of different groups, but Raphael Zellweger, who works at IVI, has put together this list. And you can see that, almost all the models that were published show protection. And some show that eosinophilic lung pathology, others don't. But the confusing thing is that sometimes with exactly the same product or a parent product, we get protection with no lung pathology, and sometimes we see protection with the lung pathology, and we're really not sure why that is. And it differs if you use different animal models, for instance, mouse versus ferret. And there's one study of non-human primates. And again, we have to be very careful when we interpret data that comes from animals, because in the end, we're not trying to protect mice against infection. We're trying to protect human beings. And at the same time, we have to remember as vaccine developers that we always have to keep safety in mind, because vaccines are given to healthy people to keep them healthy. And we don't want a vaccine. We want the vaccine to be both safe and effective. So this question that we're now kind of wrestling with, I think, comes down to several kind of key points. The first, the viruses where this was seen were the original SARS virus, and to a much lesser extent with the MERS virus, which is a similar cousin of coronavirus also. We don't know that this disease actually occurs with SARS-CoV-2. Nothing's been published, which doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, but we don't know. Again, getting to the idea that we've known this disease for 4 months, and there's some work that we need to do on this. We don't think that this is really antibody-dependent enhancement, which is seen with the original dengue vaccines. We think that this is different. There may be antibody-dependent enhancement, and we don't know, but we don't believe that this is a real issue, because in the animal models that show protection, the amount of virus is actually lower. The vaccines do protect initially. The next question is, again, the animal model. It happens sometimes in mice, sometimes in hamsters, sometimes in ferrets, and in monkeys, and with some vaccines and not others. And so what do we really know about the vaccine types associated with this problem? Is it more a problem with whole inactivated vaccine than vaccines made from adenoviruses or chimp adenoviruses? Or is it really not a problem with vaccines that are just a tiny bit of protein with an adjuvant? Again, we don't know. Does the adjuvant matter? Again, we don't know. So these are questions that exist for the old SARS virus. And because we have in mind that we always want to be safe, we need to move quickly, but as usual, keep a strong eye out to make sure that this vaccine does not generate any untoward reactions in anybody who receives the vaccine or anyone who receives the vaccine and gets infected. So to summarize then, again, we always start with the end in mind. We start with impact. Does this have an impact on number of infections and disease? But even more important than that, does this make a contribution to human health? And you saw this in the previous presentation about the different platforms that the COVID-19 is associated with at the World Economic Forum, because really vaccines have effects far beyond the initial effect on infection and disease. Those depend on vaccination programs. So a vaccine by itself doesn't protect. In order to protect, you need to vaccinate people. And that requires that we have a supply of vaccine and a demand for the vaccine. And so as we're thinking about new global health vaccines, we're really thinking about a number of different things and a number of different players. So as soon as you see this slide, you see we have a manufacturer. We have the process of manufacturing. We have a group, an NRA, National Regulatory Authority, like the Food and Drug Administration or the EMA in Europe, that have to approve this. World Health Organization also approves it. And the World Health Organization approval is really critical for use in countries around the world that don't have the ability to do what the FDA does. And then there are a number of other organizations who are very critical in helping us decide what the demand will be for the vaccine. Again, the World Health Organization, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization, Vaccine Alliance, known as Gavi, UNICEF, National Immunization Technical Advisory Groups, which are the groups of experts in each country around the world who are tasked by their government with deciding and recommending what vaccines that country should use. We will critically depend on development agencies, the DFID, USAID, COICA, CIDA, JICA, all these organizations that dispense funding to provide vaccines around the world, because for IVI, equity and access to vaccines is a really critical part of what we are and what we do. And these are the other groups that will have to cooperate in the global development of the vaccine. I think this underlines the final and concluding remarks. We will all need to participate to find a global solution to a global pandemic. And we can't ignore that this problem will exist both in high-income countries and, very importantly, in middle-income and low-income countries. So as we think about a vaccine solution, we also have to think that this vaccine has to be made globally available and provided through those supply chains that you saw in the previous presentation and made available to countries around the world. We are all at this point driven by the urgency of a world at risk. And I think that working together is going to be the key to helping us escape from the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Dr. Kim, thank you for your very interesting presentation. For the sake of time, we would like to move on to our next speaker, Professor Edward Choi. He recently joined the faculty of Graduate School of Artificial Intelligence at KAIST. Welcome, Professor Choi. Professor Choi, you can get started whenever you are ready.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. Let me just share my screen first. Okay, I think we are good to go. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from everybody, everywhere. As introduced, I'm Edward Choi from KAIST, and I'll be presenting COVID-19 and artificial intelligence, current research at KAIST. First, I'd like to thank the organizers of the International Forum for inviting me to be a keynote speaker. And I really appreciate the organizers' effort to organize a timely and helpful international forum to discuss COVID-19 today. So I'll begin this 20-minute talk with a very short introduction of myself, and then I'll just jump right into the main topics of today, the preliminary results of the ongoing AI research concerned with COVID-19 at KAIST, conducted by talented, great professors, 3 of them actually. So Dr. Gi-jung Shin, who is focused on applying SIR model in Korea and analyzing the relationship between the number of confirmed and the number of infected. Dr. Stephen Huang, who's interested in social distancing behavior of different age groups and also the mass distribution of different age groups, among different age groups. And Dr. Jinwoo Shin is interested in the Kaggle competition and the post-corona AI challenge, which is hosted by KT and the Korean government. Okay, so just to briefly introduce myself, I graduated Georgia Tech 2018 summer, and then before joining KAIST in last March, I was a software engineer in Google Health Research for a year and a half, and my current research topics are machine learning, healthcare, and natural language processing. And for the past several years, I've been focusing my effort on combining deep learning approaches for modeling electronic health records at large scale specifically, and I've tackled various problems such as disease prediction.
Okay, Professor Choi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
actually, no, many people want to see your handsome face, but it's kind of dark. So do you mind kind of closing the blinder behind you so people can see your face better?
Actually, this is already closed to the maximum effect.
Okay, but is there any way that you can kind of change the angle somehow? Because your face is very, very dark. Okay, that's getting much better now. Okay. Okay. Okay, I think that's much better. Okay, now we can really see how handsome you are. Okay, good.
Okay, thank you very much for the compliment. All right, I think I need to reshare my screen again. Are we good to go?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, sure. So yeah, I was talking about my past research topics such as disease prediction, representation learning, interpretability, combining domain knowledge with neural networks, generating synthetic records, modeling the structure of EHR. but they are not particularly concerned with COVID-19, which is the main topic of today. So I'd rather try to conduct myself as more of a messenger today, trying to share the works of my great colleagues rather than trying to introduce my own works of my own. So let's jump into the good stuff. First up is Dr. Gi-jung Shin's group.
Okay, Dr. Choi, sorry to bother you again. Can you put your screen to full size so we can see better? No, right now we can see the current slide and then the next slide together. Now I'm talking about your slide.
Is it okay now?
Oh, I think that's better. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, I think something got messed up when I was changing my position.
I see.
All right. Okay, just to resume. So first up is Dr. Gi-jung Shin's group. I need to make it into. I think we're finally good to go.
Yes, please.
Is it in full screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so to the good stuff then, because previous one was like introduction of myself, which is not really interesting topic. So the interesting topic. So first up is Dr. Gi-jung Shin's group, interested in applying SIR model and predicting the number of infected. The members were Dr. Gi-jung Shin, Seon Yoon, and Gun Lee. So they asked two questions. First is, why do typical SIR epidemic model doesn't really work in Korean situation? And the next question is, can we estimate the number of infected based on the number of confirmed? And okay, so I'm pretty sure a lot of the attendees today are familiar with the SIR epidemic model, which is to try to model the transition of the a group of people from the susceptible to the infected to the recovered. So that's thus the name SIR. And as you can see here, so this graph here represents the fit of the SIR model in Korean situation, where the solid lines, the blue line indicates the number of infected per day, and the green line indicates the number of recovered per day. And compared to other countries such as China, United States, Sweden, and Italy, although the green line seems to work pretty well, the blue lines are not really aligning that well. So the dotted lines are the projection produced by the SIR model. And you can see in Korean situation, the lines do not align pretty well compared to other countries. And so their assumption was that the reason that this doesn't work well, the SIR model not applying well in Korean situation, is that they do not consider human effort to stop the virus, spread of virus, and the human effort, which can be indicated by the number of tests conducted. And specifically in Korea, the government proactively, aggressively conducted the COVID-19 tests in the very early stage. So that probably has something to do with the SIR model not really working well in Korea. So Dr. Gi-jung Shin's group is interested in incorporating the number of tests into the epidemic model. And as you can see here, the sharp rise in the number of tests in the early stage probably doesn't, that's the reason why it is not really correlated with the number of the trend of the number of infected and number of confirmed, such as you can see here that other countries such as Italy and United States, the number of infected and the number of the confirmed and the number of the tested do correlate to some extent, but not so much in Korea. So hopefully we can see some interesting results with the new epidemic model that they're developing right now. Next up is how can we infer the number of infected from the number of confirmed? And this figure here depicts their approach right now. So the XNs are the number of infected at day N, and the YN is the number of confirmed at day N, and the Y-axis represents the days. And Dr. Gi-jung Shin's group, their approach is, since this is the hidden information that they want to know, and this is the observed information which are available. So based on that, they want to learn a filter that can estimate the values of X based on the values of the Y. And they're currently applying different approaches such as fitness, non-negativity, and smoothness approaches. And extending this approach to separate the filters into two directions. One is local filter and the other is temporal filter. So what they are doing is they assume that the relationship between the number of infected and the number of confirmed can be divided by the geography and the timeline. So so you can see the y-axis here is the day, and the different columns represent different regions, such as like the first column could be Seoul, the second column could be Busan, third could be Daejeon, or it could be counties, or it could be provinces. Basically it's a different region, and the local filters can be applied within the region, and the temporal filters can be applied across the region, but on the different time scale. So basically breaking down the filters into two different types can probably model the relationship between the number of confirmed and number of infected more properly. And hopefully we can see some interesting results very soon with this approach. Next up is Dr. Stephen Huang's group. The members are Dr. Stephen Huang, Hyun-Seung Huang, and So-Young Kim. And they also asked two interesting questions. So the questions are, first up is social distancing. So they want to evaluate how each age group is practicing social distancing. And the next up is mask distribution among vulnerable age groups. And as a preliminary step, they want to identify the vulnerable age groups using the KCDC data. So this is a quite interesting topic. If anybody's familiar with the Korean situation, there was a mass infection on January 31st. So what Dr. Stephen Huang's group is trying to do is they want to compare the difference of the floating population before and after the mass infection, specifically in the Gangnam district, where there are usually a lot of people hang around. And of course, the assumption is before and after the mass infection, a lot of people might probably hang out less in Gangnam, and they want to see if that is true. So and they're using the SK telecommunications records for tracking people's location, of course, anonymously. And here, the x-axis is the specific hour in the Gangnam district, and y-axis is the different age groups. And the red dots indicate the decrease in the floating population after the mass infection, and the blue dots indicate increase in the floating population after the mass infection. And this is the absolute difference. So interestingly, you can see that the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, they actually hang out more actively in Gangnam district, specifically around midnight, or maybe right after midnight. So it's quite unexpected. And it seems that by this graph, 20s and 60s and the 70s are practicing the most strict form of social distancing. But they actually dig one step further. So they know that because the vast majority of the floating population in Gangnam are 20s to begin with. So so Dr. Stephen Huang's group want to take that into account. And in order to do so, they need to normalize the floating population difference. So they only check the ratio, not the absolute difference of the floating population. So when they take into account the absolute number, take into account the normalization factor, now you can see that the 60s and the 70s are the group of people who actually do follow the social distancing guideline to the most strict extent. So this kind of insight can probably be used to estimate how people in different age groups will behave God forbid, if certain similar situation happens in the future. Next up is identifying mask distribution among vulnerable age groups. And as I said, they first want to identify the vulnerable age groups to begin this mask distribution analysis. And on the surface, it seems that the 20s have the highest number of confirmed patients. As you can see here, they have the highest graph, but more than 50% of the entire deceased patients are 70s and above, so 70s and above, according to this graph. So the vulnerable age groups are, of course, the elderly, the senior citizens. And it is not the case that they are uniformly distributed across the country. So some cities have more senior citizens, some cities less. And the Korean government decided to distribute the masks, 2 masks per individual. And of course, they needed to do it properly so that the vulnerable age groups in different areas of the country get the masks in their hands. So as a follow-up work, what Dr. Stephen Huang's group is trying to do is use the public mask sales API, which is provided by the government, to acquire regional mask sales to see if the masks are properly distributed across different regions to the susceptible age groups. And hopefully we can see some insightful information anytime soon. And last but not least, Dr. Jin-Woo Shin's group, the members are Dr. Jin-Woo Shin, Jun-Soo Kim, Jae-won Kim, and Jun-Ho Han, interested in the competition and the challenge. And Kaggle COVID-19 competition is about trying to predict the number of confirmed cases and the number of fatalities. Post-Corona AI Challenge, which is the challenge hosted by Korean government and the KT Telecommunications, is trying to predict the confirmed cases from overseas. So the two competitions have different themes, different focuses. Kaggle COVID-19 competition. This was posted quite some time ago now, and they give a timeline, time series data, and the objective is to predict the confirmed cases or fatalities given the history. And Dr. Jinwoo Shin's group, they use some machine learning methods such as light GBM, XGBoost, and CatBoost to try to do the preliminary test of the models. And as you can see, it's the top row indicates the number of fatalities in different countries: South Korea, United States, specifically New York, Italy, and the bottom row indicates the number of confirmed cases in South Korea, United States, and Italy. And the orange line is the true value, and the blue line is the predicted value by the machine learning model. And you can see that they align quite well to some extent. The machine learning models can probably do a pretty good job of estimating the trajectory, and based on this preliminary results, they're trying to introduce more advanced models such as neural networks or deep learning. And the next one is Post-Corona AI Challenge. This has a different theme. So that it was hosted by the Ministry of Science and ICT, National Information Society Agency, in KT. And the objective is to design a model to predict confirmed cases from overseas within a specific timeline, a specific time frame. Given the data, which are worldwide news data related to diseases, and the cell phone roaming data from KT, because foreign travelers, when they come into Korea, they usually use cell phone roaming services. So it's a way to track the trend of the foreign travelers who come to Korea. And they, as a preliminary analysis, they wanted to see the relationship between the number of confirmed cases from overseas, which is the objective that they want to predict, and the number of travelers from each country. So you can see it in the left side, the number of confirmed cases from overseas do increase over time, but the number of travelers from overseas decrease as time goes, which is probably very natural because in this difficult times, people won't usually travel travel internationally. So on the surface level, there is a negative correlation between the value that we want to estimate and the value that we were given. So this is a correlation heat map where the first row is the correlation between the confirmed cases from overseas and the travelers from different top 9 countries: China, Vietnam, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, and such and such. And you can see all the values are negatively correlated. So the darker the values, the more negatively correlated between the two factors: the confirmed cases and travelers from specific countries. So on the surface, it seems there's a reverse correlation, but they had an insightful question. So maybe it's not about the absolute number of foreign travelers who come to Korea, but it's the density that matters. So density of confirmed cases, which is defined as the number of confirmed in a specific country divided by the total population in that country. So it's more like a ratio as before. So it's not about the absolute value. So the assumption is that even though the absolute number of travelers from overseas might have gone down over time, because the number of infected must have increased over time, so the absolute number of infected traveling from overseas might have gone up. So when they actually plot that in the graph, so here it is so the x-axis is again the timeline, but the y-axis is no longer the absolute number of travelers from overseas, but it's the number of travelers multiplied by the density of confirmed cases per each country. And now you can see that the lines align pretty well. The number of confirmed cases from overseas and this line of the number of travelers multiplied by the density have a pretty close relationship, and the correlation values are now pretty high up actually. So this is again the correlation heat map, and the first row is the number of confirmed cases overseas correlation with the values here, and you can see there is not even a single negative value. So it starts with 0.7, which is a very high correlation, and all the values are at least 0.75, 0.77, something like that. So now they have a pretty good basis to build the machine learning model to predict the confirmed cases from overseas. So very insightful analysis. Yeah. Okay. So to wrap up, I introduced some of the ongoing research, AI-focused research in KAIST, and they were predicting the number of infected based on the number of confirmed. Social distancing practice, analyzing the social distancing practice, mass distribution per age group, predicting the number of confirmed cases from overseas. And as introduced, artificial intelligence technology can tackle some interesting problems, and they can provide insights into the characteristics of the pandemic, such as modeling people's behavior or tracking the distribution of the medical goods. And probably a lot more interesting ideas can arise after some time. And these types of information can complement the relatively slow process of drug development. I mean, of course, drug development is probably one of the most things that we need right now. But in the meantime, AI can probably provide some insightful analysis, helpful information so that the people can strategize better. And of course, in this trying time, cooperation is vital for timely AI and COVID-19 research. We'd like to encourage the internet researchers from all around the world to share, if they have interesting ideas, share their ideas, come up with new helpful ideas to help people in this trying time. And of course, I would like to encourage them to share their preliminary research results so that not only the government, but also the individuals can plan out ahead accordingly. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank my colleagues, Dr. Jin Shin, Dr. Stephen Huang, and Dr. Gi Shin for sharing their interesting preliminary results. And also I'd like to thank again the organizers of the GSI-IF Forum for giving me an opportunity to share the interesting results of my colleague professors. Thank you very much.
Dr. Choi, thank you for your perspective in artificial intelligence, which will be crucial in addressing future virus outbreaks. So now let us move on to the next speaker, Dr. Alexandro Papaspiridis. He is the Tertiary Education Industry Director for the Asian region of Microsoft. Dr. Papaspiridis, welcome.
Hello, can you hear me?
So please get started whenever you're ready.
Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, and evening. My name is Alexandros Papaspiridis, and I'm the Tertiary Education Lead at Microsoft Asia Pacific Japan, based out of Singapore. I would like to thank KAIST for inviting me today, and I feel privileged to be able to share my thoughts with all of you on why COVID-19 is not only a huge crisis, but it's also a very important opportunity, and what it would take to realize this. Global cooperation, as a number of speakers have already mentioned, is going to be more important more than ever as the pandemic transcends its borders. Sorry, it's just jumped. So to allow the audience to dig deeper in some of the topics that I will be able to mention, I'm sharing QR codes and URLs in a number of slides, so interested readers can pursue. Okay. When we try to understand the current crisis, we are always looking on the past to inform us on analogous situation. Whether it's the Spanish flu, which is obviously a lot of us talk about, or in dealing with a crisis, we are looking at the financial crisis or the Asia crisis. But in fact, every crisis is unique. And it's unique because the environment has changed. Sorry, I apologize for that. There seems to be slides jumping a little bit on their own. But in fact, every crisis is unique because the environment has changed, our knowledge has changed, and we should not fatalistically succumb to the inevitable of the effects of the crisis. So although human history has been spotted with pandemics, it is puzzling to see the inertia of Western countries in January and February, where they have been carried away that COVID-19 will not hit their shores. Why is that? Could it be because of what Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky called the availability heuristic or availability bias? Could it be because we managed to control the epidemics during the last 20 years in Asia? It is not that we were without warnings about the crisis that we are going to face. So we all know now the sequence of events and how these have played out across health and economics. We start with a pandemic. We have a health system that is being stressed and overwhelmed. We have a physical distancing response, which is pretty much a sledgehammer approach to increase social distancing. We have in the economy a demand and a supply shock, and hopefully we will have the virus contained. But this is where I want to focus. What's going to happen after that? Will we go back to the old normal? My key thesis that I would like to share with you today is that we should not go back to this normal. And we will not go back to this normal. We will go to a new normal, and I will show that to thrive in this new normal, we need to become data-driven. So COVID-19 has been a huge experiment that disrupts our habits requiring physical presence. We all know, of course, the negative effects, but I would like to show that beyond the adversity, there's also opportunity. In fact, COVID-19 is a change maker. Let's examine some of the positive effects. On business, we have moved to remote learning and remote work at an unprecedented rate. We have moved to e-commerce. We use delivery companies to get our shopping, to get our food from the restaurant. In the economy, yes, there's mostly negative effects, but for the lucky ones who will continue to be at work, there will be increased savings as people cannot spend that much anymore. And on the social effects, one of the interesting things is we have more time to spend with our family. As a personal story, my life routine involves a lot of travel, which I enjoy. And I miss the opportunity to connect face-to-face with a lot of people. But now I have the blessing to be with my family for a prolonged period of time. Also, another interesting social effect that we had in UK is about how the crisis became an opportunity to help homeless people. It's a very interesting reversal where about 2,000 people have been brought from the streets of England and put to travel lodges and budget hotels. So in the end, I would like to echo this snippet from CB Insights that COVID-19 has done more to digital transformation than any of us individually. And someone long ago has put really in a very great way, and in a word of a business consultant, this crisis is both a threat and opportunity. It's an threat. Let's look a little bit about how COVID-19 has impacted remote work and the shift that we had. I would like to share some of the data points from a report that we released lately on remote work trends. First, we have seen that because of the crisis and the distancing, people are turning video twice as much as before. And while this is not geographically equal, we see more people in Norway and Netherlands having 60% of their calls on with video, and in other places, not so much. For example, in India, just 22%, and South Africa, 36%. Of course, this might be attributed in part to less access to devices and stable internet and having broadband in this region. But there's also other parts of the world, like Singapore and France and Japan, where video is less used. So we can clearly see the social trends of that. Another interesting thing is that we show that the average time between a person is using Microsoft Teams and the last time has increased by an hour. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that people are working longer. I think it just shows that they are breaking up the day in a way that works for the personal productivity or makes space for a personal obligation. And finally, as a trend of whether this will stick after the crisis, in China, despite now employees going back to work and offices being open, we have more than twice the number of Teams users now compared to what we had in January before the close down. So Pandemic comes from two Greek words, pan, which means all, and demos, which means people. Pandemic therefore impacts all people, and would like to examine what we need to overcome this. So Lord Kelvin said, if you cannot measure something, then you cannot improve it. And COVID-19 has shown that so far we are not doing such a great job at measuring. Let's try to assess the case fatality ratio, or CFR, and for the purposes of this presentation, we will focus on the confirmed case fatality ratio, or CCFR, the cases that have been diagnosed as positive on the virus. So what is a confirmed case fatality ratio? It's a fraction. It's a fraction of the number of deaths due to COVID-19 divided by the number of cases confirmed with 19. Now, let's see some stats. For comparison purposes, the horizontal time axis has been set to the date that each country has exceeded 100 confirmed cases. On the left, we have some Asian countries, and on the right, some European ones. Looking at the confirmed case fatality ratio, we see that the results vary quite significantly from about 0.5% for Singapore to about 14% for France. That's a 30% range. Why do two differ so much? Let's look a little bit on the data. So remember, this is a ratio. So let's examine first the denominator, the number of cases, and see the number of factors that are influencing it. So first is who is tested, whether we have asymptomatic cases. But really the biggest reason is the number of tests. And as we can see here, the number of tests vary significantly. We all know now that Korea has been the gold standard, which used testing to put out the COVID wildfire. So other countries are following suit, like Germany and Austria, and now Italy, but with a big delay. But now even the best can learn not from a developed industrial nation, but from Iceland. Iceland was doing a month ago as many tests per 1,000 people as Germany and Italy are doing now. It was also doing serological tests and managed to understand the infection patterns. Now, let's look at the numerator, which is the number of deaths, where one would think that we have a clearer picture. After all, death, dying is a binary event. Obviously, factors influencing this can be the health system, if the health system is being inundated, if the quality of the health system, the availability of ICU beds and so on, who is admitted or not, the age profile of the people who are admitted. The potential can be unknowns like other reasons which we don't know, such as genetic, or about how do we categorize cause of death. So how good a grip do we have on the number of deaths? Let's examine this on the next slide. Two recent reports at The Economist and New York Times show that even the number of deaths are not accurately reported. Specifically, they are underreported. The Economist examined deaths in Italy, in Spain, and France, and found that the excess mortality is actually twice as much of what's reported under COVID-19, which means the actual number of deaths in these regions that the Economist examined is actually twice as many. The deviation is now so significant that the Economist decided as of this week to start tracking excess mortality. Also, New York Times, in a recent report, the authors found that the number of deaths attributed to COVID-19 in New York are underreported. This is shown on the right-hand chart. So to answer my original question, no, we don't have a clear picture of confirmed fatality ratio, as both the numerator and denominator are not reported properly. Putting it simply, we don't have reliable data. So what will it take to have this? My argument is that about how we respond to this pandemic is that the whole world needs to collaborate. And it should not be a collage of individual efforts, but it should be a coordinated one. Currently, this is a key failure that hampers our efforts to overcome this. We need data from all countries because it's the pan in the pandemic. And in the data management world, this is called managing your data estate. We need to be preserving privacy as we develop and implement this technical solution. In Microsoft, we have developed 7 privacy principles, which you can read in the link there, and which we offer to governments, public health authorities, academics, and industries to consider. We need powerful visualization tools because we're going to have a lot of data, and these visualization tools should be to the hands of everyone, not just the analyst. And we need testing, and we need to be like Republic of Korea and now Iceland. Let me briefly touch about the comprehensive ways that us at Microsoft are working together with our frontline customers, the hospitals, the universities, the schools, the researchers to fight this together. We are helping educators, including hundreds of thousands of students in the Republic of Korea and universities on the remote learning. We are helping researchers access machine-readable knowledge derived from Microsoft Academic Graph. And this week, we launched a new initiative to support researchers using AI to respond to COVID-19. There's links for anyone who is interested to know more, or you can contact me. So looking at the education, we are supporting school systems and ministries of education across the world. And right now, with a report that we issued 2 weeks ago, we were covering 183,000 tenants. Tenant is a technical word that represents an organization. And some of these tenants can have 500,000 or 600,000 students each in 175 countries using Teams for Education. COVID-19 has been a huge remote learning experiment. And I have to say that I've been impressed about how thoughtful change management has happened so quickly. With not too many changes in learning methods, adjusting processes and technology to evolve together for the benefit of the students. On higher education, there are a lot of concerns. And these concerns obviously have to do about the impact of the incoming class and what will it happen on the fall term. And this can be monumental and non-reversible. It may not concern the top 100 or 200 institutions around the world, but higher education is not just these institutions. There are thousands of universities, and the impact can be irreversible. As an example, will international students come back? Well, for this to happen, you need to have 2 governments to agree. You have the government of the origin of the student and the government that institution. And also the university must be open. Will the parents of the student still be able to afford the expenses? Will an international student spend tens of thousands of dollars for a 1-year master's program if half of it is going to be remote? So there's a lot of uncertainties. And then in terms from the university perspective is how do you differentiate from each other in a remote learning setup? How do you build your brand? Or how do you differentiate yourself even from edX and Coursera degrees? In Microsoft, we built a model to help universities to deal with this situation. It is built after the well-known Kubler-Ross model about how humans handle grief. And it's basically about 3 stages. It's about first the emergency response, which is the shift to remote learning to ensure that we have academic continuity. And then right now, we are moving to the next stage, which is how to improve what we built hastily in place and making sure that we get organized for the fall term. But eventually, there's a much bigger opportunity out there. And the opportunity is about how we are able to have digital transformation on higher education. So how can universities thrive in such uncharted waters with a lot of open questions? Let me summarize what we think that it will take for universities to succeed. First, it needs a huge culture change. We have to embrace the uncertainty. Obviously, academia has been used to a very stable planning, but now it's a new normal. Also, we have to learn it all. We have to be open to embrace best practices, not only from what we have been used to, but what other people are doing. Second, universities need to become data-driven enterprises, and they need to build a combined and physical and digital presence. We should not move the lecture experience online. This is a model that has been tried in the MOOCs and has failed. If you want to see how this phygital experience can be built in, just look about the pioneering work that Professor David Kellerman from UNSW has done with this QR code. Third is we need to bring data together and break silos where data sits. We need to have a secure infrastructure that guarantees privacy. Privacy cannot exist without IT security. Sorry, it's just jumped. So closing, first, I would like to extend my congratulations to KAIST for the leadership with GSI and to thank you, President Shin. COVID-19 presents a huge opportunity, and we should reimagine as the combined physical digital experience, and we should not go back to our old ways. International collaboration and a shift to a data-driven strategy will be the prerequisites for success. Security and privacy should always be a priority and not an afterthought. Thank you very much.
Dr. Papaspirides, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I wish you and your family safety and health back in Singapore. Take care.
Thank you.
So now let us move on to our last speaker, Hong Taek-yong, the Deputy Minister of the Office of R&D Policy at the Korea Ministry of Science and Technology. He will talk about Korea's recent response to the coronavirus and future directions for international cooperation. Please welcome Deputy Minister Yong.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Hong Taek-yong, Deputy Minister of Office of R&D Policy, the Ministry of Science and ICT. Let me begin by expressing my deepest appreciation for KAIST President Shin Sung-chul for organizing this forum that gathers experts from around the world to share ideas and discuss measures in the fight against COVID-19. I find this forum even more meaningful, considering how important international cooperation is in overcoming a global crisis, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, I join you on behalf of the Ministry of Science and ICT to present the ways in which Korea has responded to COVID-19 and our nation's directions in terms of international cooperation. I skip content. First, I will talk about Korea's experience in disease prevention and response. In the case of Korea, as of April 20th, we have had a total of 10,674 patients with an average of 13 new cases per day. The number of new cases began declining at the end of February, and we are now maintaining a trend of less than 20 new cases per day. This was made possible due to several factors. A notable example of Korea's effective disease prevention system include the use of self-diagnosis and self-quarantine applications based on ICT. Epidemiological tracking of infected patients also using ICT, and implementation of living and treatment support center for mild cases. Korea is working hard to develop new means for overcoming the COVID-19 crisis through the use of technology. For example, in the biotechnology sector, the government has provided support for development for testing kits and research on treatment. Our 5 diagnosis reagent companies from Korea are currently producing PCR-based diagnostic kits upon attaining the emergency use approval. Among these companies, 4 have participated in government R&D programs to carry out their studies on testing kit development. In addition, our nation's research institutions, including Institute of Pasteur Korea, the Korea Research Institute of Chemical Technology, the Korea Research Institute of Bioscience and Biotechnology, and Seoul National University are striving to identify exogenous drugs that are effective against COVID-19. Cyclosonid, an asthma treatment marketed as Albesco, has shown a promising result, and we are undertaking clinical research. Many private companies are also working hard to develop a treatment and vaccines for the virus. Furthermore, the government worked with the private sector on a big data project in 2017 to establish a system to track the inflow and transmissions of infectious disease through communication location data and credit card transaction records. This made it easier to conduct the epidemiological investigations regarding the spread of COVID-19. To ensure COVID-19 spread predictions can be effectively used by the disease control authorities. In their decision-making process, we provide researchers with statistical data, such as food traffic data based on communication and epidemiological data of Korea Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The Korean government's continuous investment in R&D has allowed the nation to utilize a wide array of technologies to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Korea has the highest ratio of R&D spending to GDP among OECD countries, and government is continually increasing R&D spending every year. In particular, the current administration has aggressively expanded funding for basic research centered around researchers, which provide the stepping stones for biological and ICT development. Next, I would like to discuss the economic and social impact that COVID-19 will have on our nation. The COVID-19 epidemic has brought about the rise of a non-contact service industry. In case of Korea, we have seen a sharp rise in e-commerce services. In addition, with the school semester continually being delayed, the online education service market is also expected to grow substantially. I'm also aware that demand for video conferencing systems, such as the one we are using for this forum, is continually rising at a rapid rate. However, such industrial opportunities also come with certain risks. Non-contact services are susceptible to cyber threats, and preparation must be made to prevent such attacks. In addition to security issues, stability in job market due to the shift into non-contact centric industries is a key issue for Korean economy. Furthermore, the demand and growth of non-contact services is propagating a digital divide that reflects wealth inequality. with Korea opting for online classes instead of a normal offline education method, the approach to this issue differs drastically depending on whether a student has access to the necessary digital devices. The private and public sector of Korea are working together to implement various measures, such as supplying smart devices to children of low-income families. In addition, data providers are waiving data fees for low-income citizens. COVID-19 will have a substantial impact on online education. In case of Korea, we began by implementing online lectures at our universities in March. And this was extended to elementary, middle, and high school in April. Professors, lecturers, and teachers are conducting the lessons through live recorded video lectures. Science and Technology Institute under the Ministry of Science and ICT are also conducting all of their lectures online. So students can see their courses without the need to be present in lectures hall. The government does not view this as a mere shift from offline to online education, but an opportunity to experiment with a new education method. Thus, the government is working on a new education model based on personalized online education system. International cooperation is absolutely crucial in fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the world responses in the post-COVID-19 era. Korea has strongly emphasized the importance of working with other nations in early stage of our COVID-19 response. We participate weekly in a multilateral science and technology leaders meeting organized by OSTP of the United States, and our president has emphasized the importance of economic and social exchange between countries. During the Group 20 Leaders Summit at the end of March, our testing kits, which have been verified through the numerous tests conducted with the country, are being actively exported overseas. In addition, international cooperation is actively being pursued in the science and technology field, with open access agreement and being signed at the Science and Technology Leaders Meeting regarding COVID-19 research result. The COVID-19 pandemic is also expected to adversely affect the global economy. As I previously mentioned, security issue arising from non-contact services, job insecurity due to the transformation in industry, and digital inequality are some of the issues that may predict will need to be addressed in the near future. Nations of the world must unite and collaborate to respond to such matters. Only through international cooperation can we revitalize the global economy and ensure that measures are put in place to help those who are disadvantaged by such sweeping changes. In the past, the Spanish flu had a total of 3 periods of infectious spreading. Of this period, the one had the most impact on the world. Whether the number of new COVID-19 cases in Korea is stabilizing, and there is no guarantee that another crisis will not occur in the near future. We must stay vigilant in responding to such a potential risk on a daily basis. And international cooperation is a key key means of combating such crisis. Korea is fully open to global cooperation in combating COVID-19 and other potential risks. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister Hong. Personally, I'm also very proud of the way that the Korean government is handling the current situation. So now I would like to conclude our keynote session. A huge thank you to all the speakers for their excellent presentations and to the audience for watching this online forum. I am Professor Hoon Son at KAIST, and it was my pleasure to moderate the first half of our forum. Next, we will continue with our panel discussions, so please stay tuned. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone participating online and offline from Korea and also from abroad. Let me introduce myself. My name is So-young Kim, and I'm the professor of the Graduate School of Science, Technology, and Policy here at KAIST. I'm also directing the Korea Policy Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was established last year out of the collaboration between the South Korean government and the World Economic Forum to promote emerging technologies and also develop governance frameworks for the Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies. I'll be moderating the first panel on economic impacts and educational changes from the coronavirus pandemic. Here I have 4 panelists, 2 from Korea and 2 from abroad, and also 2 addressing economic issues and the other 2 also addressing educational challenges. This panel is planned to address some of the toughest questions and challenges from the coronavirus era. Especially, we are characterizing this coronavirus crisis with different words such as Great Recession, Great Depression, or even Great Paralysis, or even a war. Indeed, we are fighting a war against coronavirus these days, and all these multiple characterizations attest to great uncertainties we are facing in these times, in this hard time. So let me just begin with the first panelist, Dr. David Dollar. Let me just introduce Dr. Dollar. Dr. Dollar is currently a senior fellow in the John Thornton China Center at the Brookings Institution. In fact, he is hosting the Brookings Trader podcast, Dollar and Cents, which I really enjoy to watch. And he's an expert on the Chinese economy and also the U.S.-China economic relations. In particular, he has served as the U.S. Treasury's economic emissary to China. And also he worked for the World Bank for 20 years. And also he held a position as a director for China and Mongolia between 2004 and 2009. So hello, Dr. Dollar. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you very clearly. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, yeah, it's great. I have asked to address some of the interesting questions that every ordinary citizen is having these days. For example, are we going to have this as a U-shape, L-shape, or even as Dr. Rubini said, I-shaped? And now it seems we wouldn't have this sharp V-shaped recovery. So my question is, how you project the economic recovery from this coronavirus crisis? And yesterday we had very shocking news that oil prices have gone down for the first time in history. So how do you project the future now?
Well, obviously there's tremendous uncertainty, so we have to be careful about any predictions. But I would not expect a V-shaped or rapid recovery. I think we're going to have a long, deep depression in the global economy, could easily last for 2 years or more. I think the first wave of the virus, which started in China, we've seen the economic effects. You know, China's first quarter GDP growth was negative 6.8, and a lot of China's economic variables were down 20% from the year before. And this makes sense because this is both a supply shock and a demand shock. You know, we tell people to stay home from work, so they're not contributing to production, and then they're also not going out and buying products or traveling and buying services. So I think the immediate shock is pretty predictable, and now we're seeing it in the United States. In the United States, we'd had 10 years of good job creation, 22 million jobs created over 10 years, and now we've lost 22 million jobs in just 4 weeks. So it's really breathtaking to watch the decline. And I think if somehow the health problem could be solved very, very quickly, then you might be able to talk about a quick bounce back in a V shape. But after listening to all the scientists in your program and reading what other scientists have to say, it seems unlikely that we get a vaccine in less than about 2 years. China has gotten the first, what I call the first wave of the virus under control. So you're seeing a little bit of bounce back toward normality in China. Big factories have opened, many people are back at work, but it's clear that people are not going back to their old behaviors. You know, movie theaters opened in some cities and no one went to the movies. So then they closed the movie theaters again. People are not going back to restaurants, they're not traveling. Small and medium enterprises are only producing at about 1/3. And I think, while I emphasize the uncertainty, I think we have to worry that this could drag on for quite a while. If it takes 2 years or so to have a vaccine, until then, people are probably going to be very cautious, and that change in behavior is going to keep demand down. And I think we're likely to have a prolonged recession. I would add that, if we look back at the Great Depression, and each situation's different, so we shouldn't overdo the analogy. But if we look at the Great Depression, what made that much worse after the initial shock was the rise of protectionism in all the major economies. So I worry that while we have this prolonged recession, which will be difficult enough, if countries start introducing protectionism, it's going to be much worse, and it's going to last longer. And the U.S. goes into this with a lot of protection aimed against China in particular, and that has not been taken away by the Trump administration. So I think there is a real risk that this recession, which is going to be bad enough, then gets exacerbated by protectionism. If I could say one more thing at the start, it would be that I really worry most about developing countries. It's probably the health pandemic is spreading to developing countries. It's not clear how serious the health problem will be, but the economic problems for developing countries are very clear. Prices of fuel, you mentioned the negative price for oil yesterday, which was shocking. Prices of metals are down. Price of food on average is down about 15%. And many developing countries export these primary products. So they're taking a big hit to their income, and they do not have the fiscal space to have the government make up for that. So Japan can stimulate 20% of GDP, and the US stimulus is 10% of GDP. Developing countries are not going to be able to bring that kind of fiscal firepower. They're going to be looking to the IMF for help. They're going to be looking to the international community. And I think that's just as important as fighting protectionism, is providing the support to developing countries. On a positive note, the G20 agreed on a debt moratorium for official debts of the least developed countries. So that's a good first step. But moratorium just means it's delayed for a year, and it doesn't affect emerging markets. It only affects the least developed countries. So I consider that a start, but probably we're going to need a lot more debt relief and financial support for developing countries. So this is, my main message would be this is really a global economic emergency. And the extent we can stick together and avoid protectionism and support developing countries and international institutions, that's going to make it definitely less bad, help us get out of it, even if it takes a couple of years. So I'll stop there for an initial comment.
Well, I'd like to ask just a very, very quick question, following up on your first initial comments. As a Chinese expert, I wonder how you, not me, but as a Chinese expert, how do you think of China, the importance of China for the global economy? Just because one of the earliest commentaries that came out from, say, New York Times or Wall Street Journal was the ultimate test of the coronavirus pandemic is actually how dependent we are on China for almost everything, from production to consumption. So I wonder which sectors or industries would be hardest hit by this coronavirus, especially in relation to the trades with China.
Well, in the global financial crisis in 2009, China played a very positive role. They were the ones with that big stimulus back at that time period, and they really sucked in a lot of imports from around the world. After an initial shock in 2009, prices for things like fuel and metals actually went up because of Chinese demand. So China provided a lot of support to other developing countries. It is now at the center of the key value chains in the world for automobiles and for electronics. So the world is very much dependent on China for many specific things. I think what we need in terms of medical equipment, frankly, any advanced economy can produce these. So I don't see the US or Korea or anyone else dependent on China to produce the necessary equipment and protective gear. The US is doing a rather incompetent job of managing this, but that's this US administration. I don't think that's anything inherent about the US economy. But as we go ahead, probably value chains are going to evolve because of this crisis. We'll probably see more regional value chains, less global ones, and more emphasis on resiliency. We got very much excited with the idea of just-in-time production and very low inventories and efficiency. And now the weakness of that whole system has been exposed by this crisis as it sweeps around the world.
Okay, thank you very much for just a quick response. But I cannot continue just discussing only with you, but we have to move to the next panelist, Dr. Jung Hae-seo from the Korea Development Institute. Dr. Seo was the senior policy counselor for the Strategic Planning Bureau of the Ministry of Planning and Budget. He has long experience in commenting and also actually making policy suggestions for the Korean government, especially for economic issues. I know him personally, and I have been following him on TV news and other online interviews. He is really a great expert to talk about what impacts this coronavirus pandemic is going to have on our economy. I'm particularly interested how this crisis actually compares with some of the earliest crises we have had in Korea. I guess Dr. Seo prepared a quick, slide.
Would you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hello, David. Good morning or good evening. Anyway, some months ago, I and David met in Seoul with Professor Petri from United States. We have talked about the uncertainties surrounding trade disputes between U.S. and China, and the trade dispute between Korea and Japan. At that time, we concluded with some positive affirmative prospects. Probably we can solve that situation, the uncertainty, from the form of affirmative action from the government side, because we believed at that time it was created by the political parties. Now it is quite different. It's started as a healthcare issue, and then it hit upon whole areas of economy. I'm not any expert on the future prospect of the economy, this effect, but instead I will present one interesting aspect of my team at KDI have done currently. It is about, it's called the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index. We collected most of data from 17 Korean newspapers. The basic methodologies are developed by American economists. I will skip all the details about the methodology. On the top of the panel, you can see the trend of the Economic Uncertainty Index. The top one, the highest one, shows the Japan-South Korean trade dispute. It caused a lot of uncertainty in Korean policy making and people's mind. Compared with that dispute event, the current COVID-19 is relatively calm. Probably the word calm is not appropriate, but relatively small in magnitude. I checked with my staff to compare the next slide, please. Some other index composed of, in Korean word, anxiety and crisis. So in Korean word, uncertainty does not contain all the meanings of uncertainty per se. So we expanded the meaning and the word, including anxiety and crisis. Next slide, please. I should make, sorry, okay. This is the one. And you can see the green line is the original EPU index, and the other two red lines are complementary anxiety index and crisis index. Very surprisingly, we can magnify the last ones, but the data is at the end of the last month, March. So very interestingly, the uncertainty index has been remained low, but compared with the uncertainty index, anxiety and crisis index is becoming to start to increase. So this indicator shows very important lessons to us. The current economic crisis is not a matter of economic crisis per se, it's a matter of psychological issues. So we interpret this trend. So in order to cope with this disaster, we need to maintain the trust between the government and the public. That is the key lesson we derive from this exercise. This data will be released from tomorrow at KDI homepage. You can access to all the details. I make some brief comment on what we have learned in Korea from this COVID-19 disaster. The first one is, as David mentioned also already, that we have already globally connected each other. We have seen the impact of one event in one region magnifies rapidly and greatly across the borders. One key aspect in economics is the global value chains has been magnified and intensified across the border. Another one is the value of a public health system has been very, very importantly recognized to maintain sound public health system for ordinary times. It's very, very critical and important for this crisis years. As I mentioned just before, showing the EPU index, the trusted relationship between the government and civil society plays a very, very important and decisive role in effective crisis management. Although there was a trial and error in the initial stages of the situation, in Korea, political leadership exerted a very strong control system, and the result provided lessons for many countries currently suffering from the COVID-19 crisis. We have experienced how the global value chain works, from small consumer goods such as masks to durable goods such as automobiles. The entire process of manufacturing and consumption is connected across borders. If a failure occurs somewhere in the network, we need to make an emergency response. It depends on the ordinary capacity accumulated over a long period of ordinary times. The ordinary times preparation is very critical in coping with the crisis. And some other keynote speakers mentioned before us that the new opportunities are also arising up. The industry is changing significantly, so we can expect this crisis will accelerate digital transformation across industries. There's a clear, but which industry will benefit more and less will be further investigated. Currently, we expect that telemedicine systems and commuting and video conferencing and online education, those all are mentioned by previous speakers. And also non-contact economic activities and quick deliveries, all those are increasing. But also what David mentioned, that globally some suffering industries, we need to rescue packages. So I will join at the second round, stopping here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Still though, I have a question, very quick question, about your thought on the role of the government, especially in addressing the hardship faced by small and medium enterprises, and also some of the hardest hit sectors such as the air industries and retail industries that essentially depend on face-to-face contact. So my question is how this current COVID-19 crisis is going to change the structure of our economy, especially in relation to, for example, big versus small and medium enterprises, and also in terms of different sectors having different impacts. And also, what about the government, how they have to do what they have to do in order to really compensate the loss of those losing sectors?
Officially, and next month, KDI will release our formal forecasting about Korean economy this year and coming years. And responding to Professor Kim's questions, I might say this way. It depends on how we cope with the situation. So currently, very interesting and hot debate in Korea is whether we introduce disaster basic income schemes, for example. Here, the key issue is how to identify the weaknesses and strengths in the whole economy and those who severely suffered from this disaster. If we are using, for example, the credit card record, then we can easily identify who will be most hardly hit. Some credit card companies has good information on the consumers and retailers, for example. So we can easily identify those who should receive the basic income. So it's a matter of how to introduce this kind of system in emergency situations. But very unfortunately, our discussion in Korea is that whether to give this money to all people or the lower 70%. It's a very meaningless. The key point is how to introduce, how to target the right person and right groups in these situations. So we need to change our attention. whether or not to how to implement, how to target the right person. That's my response.
Let's just discuss more when we get to the second round. Okay. So our third panelist, Dr. Rebecca Winthrop. Very nice to meet you online. She is a senior fellow and co-director of the Center for Universal Education in the Brookings Institution. And she was the chair of the technical advisory group for the UN Secretary General's Global Education First Initiative. And she has been involved in many, many international organizations, including the World Economic Forum, Global Future Council on Education, and also MasterCard, credit card foundation's Youth Leading Advisory Committee. So I'm very, very looking forward to what you are going to say about this tremendous challenge to education since this outbreak of coronavirus. As of April 14, 188 countries around the world have closed schools nationwide. And also this, as you know, of course, we have opened the schools, but not offline, but online in Korea. And this closure is affecting 1.5 billion students, which amounts to 91% of total enrolled students. And I guess this is just beyond our scope of imagination. But how do you see what's happening in the education sector these days?
Yeah, nice to see you, and thank you for having me. And the statistics you outlined are ones that us in the education community have been, starting on March 1st, it was 6 countries had nationwide school closures, and every day we just saw more and more countries till virtually now. I checked today, actually, it's 191 countries have nationwide school closures. So as you said, it's unheard of. It literally is unheard of. This has never, ever happened in the history of education to virtually have every single country in the world close school. Not in World War II, nearly were that many kids out of sort of normal school or Spanish flu or anything. So for the education community, I think if I would have really 2 sort of top line messages, which is that this crisis has laid bare, the inequalities in society, in our global society. So, at multiple levels. First, many countries are attempting to do some form of home-based learning, remote learning, often in Korea, online learning, etc. It's very different across countries, but that experience really depends on your family. And right there, all of a sudden, it's really exposing the inequities within a country across families. And families who have access to technology, are literate, have books. In Korea, that might be virtually everybody, but in many countries it's not. It's going to really hurt the kids who don't have that. So just at a very, parent level, family level, there's inequities. It's also really exposing inequities in our global education community. So in the developed countries, high-income countries, about 90% of the school systems are providing some form of online or broadcast, which is TV largely, continuing learning. In the developing world, it's only 25% of countries, is the best estimates that my colleague has done, is providing any type of sort of remote learning opportunities. And that's largely radio and TV. So right there, you see huge disparities across the world with the ability to even provide ongoing education at this point in time. And then I think the third big area of real inequity that we're going to see, I would say more and more as the next school year happens, the next government budget cycle happens, is something that David referenced earlier, about the fiscal space he was talking about restarting the economy, but we're really worried about government budgets. So frankly, we're worried about the education budgets in every country. They're being squeezed in high-income countries already. We're seeing that. We're getting reports out of international institutions who support education systems in developing countries, like colleagues at the World Bank, that they would like to get more loans out the door and have requests for it, but are being told to just focus on health. And it's very understandable, to invest in health, because it's actually crucial to solve everything. And so education in some ways might be dependent on that. But in developing countries, education budgets are already 90% going to recurrent cost teacher salaries. So if they're squeezed, it's virtually impossible to operate their system. So those are kind of the big headline messages of inequality.
Yeah, well, the digital divide has been around us for such a long time, but since the coronavirus really laid bare the real digital divide we have across families and also across the world, we have come to realize that we need to address access problem, but also I wonder how you think of the quality problem, because we are having online classes. And then we are now having really big problems, for instance, in eye contact and not real, spontaneous responses, all are planned and fixed somewhere. I actually personally found it much harder to have a meeting online. I thought initially it would be easier, but in fact it's much harder to have online meetings, because you actually get a lot of cues and signals, not necessarily from talks, but also from faces and expressions. So my question is how we can also address the problem of quality of education for almost every level, from children, kindergarten to, tertiary education, universities.
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought that up, because some of the previous speakers talked about the potential of this to be a real innovation moment in education, and I think that does exist. But I actually personally am extremely worried about the type of innovation that people are talking about, because it could actually be bad innovation that, as you say, even cements online learning practices that we know are not helpful from the learning sciences. We know how people learn, and you need interactivity, and there's ways to do it, but it's very sophisticated. And professors in universities down to school classroom teachers, they could be the best teachers in the world physically in a classroom. It does not mean they're going to be the best teachers in the world online. There's actually different strategies, and they can, they need support, they need tips, they need training. It's not that they can't get there, but just assuming that we're just going to stick a teacher in front of a camera and broadcast out, and it's going to be a quality learning experience, is false. And you talk to anybody who has deep expertise in distance learning, they will tell you the same thing. And so I'm quite actually worried about cementing that sort of bad practice, bad innovation in online learning, because it will also, the other piece that I'm worried about, the other thing it will do is it could end up hurting the move to real useful innovation. We do want technology to be used to advance learning and be able to bring enriched learning experiences to a much broader group of people. But there's good ways to do it and bad ways, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you for your comments. So let me turn to our final panelist, Dr. Young-sun Ra, who is currently the president of the Korea Research Institute for Vocational Education and Training, which is TRIVET for short. There are many VET institutions around the world doing very similar tasks. She was a researcher at the Vocational Training Research Institute of Korea Manpower Agency, and also an assistant professor of Korea University of Technology and Education. She also served on the self-assessment committee of the Ministry of Employment and Labor and has many other assignments on government committees. Dr. Ra, as the president of government agency, she really, thank you very much for coming here, because I know I'm relatively, free, but in charge of big organizations, you made all the way to Daejeon to come and participate offline. So she prepared a quick presentation, so I'm going to ask some questions after your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Young-Sun from Krivet. First of all, I would like to express my appreciation to KAIST for inviting me, and thanks to moderator Professor So-Young Kim. Krivet is a national research institute specializing in skills development and vocational education and training. Our research focused on school to work and labor market transition, improving employability through vocational training and education. Regarding our issues, I would like to talk about on the possible changes of work environment after COVID-19 pandemic. I'll prepare some slides. As you know, recently, ILO report COVID-19 and the world of work. COVID-19 pandemic is now affecting almost 2.7 billion workers, representing around 81% of the world workforce. Business face catastrophic losses, especially among smaller enterprises, while millions of workers are vulnerable to income loss and layoff. Job loss and declining working hours occur in hardest hit sectors, for example, retail, trade, accommodation, and food service and manufacturing. According to Korean policymaker, employment may increasing among part-time workers and small business owners. The total number of unemployment beneficiaries reached 536,000, up to 16% from a year earlier. This slide shows policy response, four kinds of policy response. Firstly, stimulating the economy and employment, for example, active fiscal policy. Secondly, supporting enterprise jobs and income, social protection, for example, social protection, employment retention measures. Thirdly, protecting workers in workplace, for example, adapt to work arrangement, expand access to paid leave. Finally, rely on social dialogue for solution. I think not yet. At the early stage of COVID-19, South Korea focused on employee retention and introduced a new work arrangement. As you know, large enterprise, Samsung, SK, LG, CJ, and Kakao allowed flexible working hours and remote work. The nation's largest automaker, Hyundai Motor, has restricted outsiders from entering its workplace through temperature check. This slide shows the future of work is changing due to COVID-19. COVID-19 has effectively become a tipping point for remote workers. Many of us in the tech industry were already familiar with the tools and techniques for working outside an office. I mean the remote work. The characteristic of the future work is as follows: the unpredictable future, prioritization of work-life balance, movement toward agile working, increased expectation from employee, trend toward social sustainability. This slide shows example of South Korea, the online learning experiment. Less than 2 years ago, South Korea started online learning experiment. The Ministry of Education started online learning. The new school year, which usually started in early March, was postponed by 5 weeks to April 6. Over concern that most of people worry about the cluster of pandemic. I think Korea excellent ICE technology support the social distancing. I mean the social distancing is the remote education and remote work. This slide is a 2020 emerging job report. LinkedIn 2002 Emerging Jobs Report names artificial intelligence specialist as the job that showed the most growth in the past 5 years. Data science, also sales and healthcare jobs are more needed. This job report was published at the end of last year, 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic. This slide, the COVID-19 create a new job opportunity. LinkedIn analysis shows the 10 most in-demand jobs in US during the COVID-19 pandemic this year, March. We can see some changes slightly. Store associate, healthcare specialist, academic advisor for online learning, delivery driver is newly added. South Korea, as you know, is famous for door-to-door delivery service during the COVID-19 pandemic. In short, the COVID-19 will have a lasting effect on the labor market and could change the composition of available jobs indefinitely. The last slide, I would like to suggest the social issues to tackle after COVID-19 pandemic. Firstly, we will try to create new rules, including the flexible working hours and remote work. And then we trying to make a stable networking infrastructure. We are trying to search solution to digital divide. And then we are trying to improve global solidarity. Can we go back to our previous lifestyle? I hope. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have 2 questions, very, very common to both of us as sort of career women, because now we are working at home, and people are saying, oh, you just take care of your children at home while working, so this is a perfect environment for women. But some people say, now I have double burdens, like working at home, taking care of my kids. So on the one hand, it's good to work at home, but at the same time, it's not necessarily women, even men also saying that it's not really 100% efficient working at home. So how do you think of these remote work environments, especially for women?
Yes, a very good question. My colleague, my daughter, worry about 2 burdens. One is working, one is childcare and housework. So I think we are making the new rules, new normal, including flexible working and the remote work. So I think these issues, men and women together, all family concerned to these issues. So we all together are trying to approach the new normal, new working rules. Thank you.
Well, another question, because you are heading a big government agency, when you see people, right, researchers of your institution working at home, and you cannot check how they are working, right? So my question is, remote work environment, in a sense, is a challenge not only in terms of whether we can check employees are working properly or not. So some people actually are avoiding working at home because it's much easier work in offices because of bosses or supervisors. So as a president of CRIVET, are you really okay with people working at home, or actually you really like to go back to the old normal?
Yeah, it depends on the generation. So my generation, all days worry about the outside work, and they skip and family work. But now young generation, they are trying to keep the balance work and family. So my organization allow the work and life balance. So during the COVID pandemic, we provided the remote work for having children, having the pregnant workers. Thank you.
It seems Dr. Seo has a follow-up question.
In my center, we are composed of 60 persons, and 2/3 are women. And after the break of this disease, we allowed anybody who are willing to work at home will take a home office. So everybody, especially managers, are worried about the inefficiencies and ineffectiveness, but the reality is on the contrary. We are all rapidly adapting to this situation, but the married women want to stay at office rather than at home because of two burdens. So we have to solve this all together. Yes, is my quick response to this question.
A very interesting observation. So we have actually very few minutes left. So instead of a full second round, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to actually make a final comment, especially on the challenges, but also how we can deal with the challenges. Just because now Governor Cuomo of the New York State, hardest hit state in the United States, started to talking about building back better. So it's not about building back the old normal. It's going to be reimagining what society we like to live, what government we like to have, or what kind of economy we like to create. So I'd like each of you actually giving a final comment on how we can build a better world or recover to a better future after, hopefully, this pandemic is over. So let's start with Dr. Dollar.
Okay, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the panel and I learned a lot, and it left me somewhat more optimistic because you heard from my comments, I think that we're facing a very serious economic challenge that's likely to continue on, and it's going to be particularly bad for poor people. But we had on the panel some very interesting ideas about how we can improve education. Personally, I actually like working at home. I'm saving so much time not driving into the office, and I have more control over meetings. So I don't want to live, I don't want to work only this way forever. But I think we should remember that the point of the economy is to serve human beings. So I think things are naturally going to change, and we should try to make them change in a way where education is better, the workplace environment is better, people's health and happiness are better. And if we can bring something good out of this crisis, then that would be the best outcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Dr. So.
Oh, yes. Previously, probably Mr. Yong mentioned that the Korean government stands over the transparency and openness and democracy. That keyword is also straightforwardly applicable to economic situations. I believe that we have overcome this situation by openness and democracy. So we have circulated all the information to the public, and we have opened all the information knowledge to the public. So this have to be continued on, and also especially across borders. I strongly worried after this disaster, some groups of people might incline to make negative ways to close doors. This destroying all our lives. So what that Professor Kim, you mentioned that building a better future depends upon how to implement the idea of openness and democracy and continued. So probably the Korean government and the Korean think tank should strive for this direction. That's my response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. So. Rebecca, can you make a final comment?
Yes. I mean, I think it's a very good question. For education, I think there is an opportunity, and in fact, because of the crisis, I think it might end up being more than just a nice thing to do. It might be one of the only ways we can approach things to really address the inequality I talked about. Is this idea of really employing leapfrog solutions especially for the most marginalized. We did a large study at Brookings looking at 3,000 education innovations around the world and found that, there are, as I talked about before, bad innovation, but actually there's in every continent and many countries around the world, we looked at 160 plus countries, there's great examples of ways, innovations that education could be more effective, reach more kids, and much more quickly help the most marginalized learn in a quality way. And that includes a mix of, online and offline learning. And I think if we could really focus in on harnessing those and moving them to the center of education systems, it would be a great service to all of the kids.
Okay, thank you. Finally, going to Dr. Rock. Can you just make a final
Thank
comment?
you. I would like to quote Harari comment. If we choose global solidarity, it will be a victory against the coronavirus, all future epidemics and crises. And I think no national lockdown. Please enjoy social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic and then move toward global solidarity and gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It seems everybody is citing some famous guy from the history and also from current world. So let me do the same. The famous British philosopher and mathematician and logician during the interwar period, Bertrand Russell commented that the war does not determine who is right, only who is left. So after this war against the COVID-19, I guess the question is who or which sector, which industry, which country is going to the left. And I guess all of our talks today is really about the challenges we are having to overcome this global crisis and how we build or rebuild global solidarity as all the world leaders are asking us to join. Thank you everyone joining here, especially our panelists and also viewers from everywhere. Thank you. And let me just pass over the session to the second panel. And the panelist, the chair, let me introduce her. Professor Sang Ali.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sang Ali. I am a faculty member here at KAIST in the Department of Bio and Brain Engineering. So most of us get our updates on the latest coronavirus research from the news or the media. But for the final session of today's forum, we will hear directly from the researchers themselves on the recent advances in medical and information technology. I'm pleased to introduce to you first Dr. Wang-Shik Ryu, the CEO of Institut Pasteur Korea and Professor of Biochemistry at Yonsei University. Hi, Dr. Ryu, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. Hello, thank you for joining us.
Okay, good morning.
Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kristen Beck, the lead bioinformatician at IBM Almaty Research Lab. Hi, Kristen. I know you're in the US and it's late at night over there. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. I grabbed the spare lamp. It's okay.
Finally, we have on stage with me Professor Chin-Woo Shin from the Department of Electrical Engineering and Graduate School of Artificial Intelligence here at KAIST. Hello, Professor Shin. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hello.
So thank you all for joining us. Please tell us a bit more about your work and the role it plays in our fight against COVID-19. First, Dr. Ryu, would you please start whenever you're ready?
I appreciate KAIST Global Research Institute for invitation, and it's my honor to join this important forum as a speaker. We are facing new era of disease pandemic, which is yet to end. And COVID-19 crisis led to unprecedented casualty, over 170,000 deaths and over 2 million infections as of today. And I'd like to share some progress we made in Institute Pasteur Korea toward the therapeutics for the treatment of SARS-CoV-2. May I have a slide, please?
Dr. Yu, if you would like, you can directly share your own screen.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Upon the COVID-19 question we have is that, do we have working strategies that would end COVID-19 crisis? The strategy we took was drug repurposing or repositioning. What does that mean? That is literally drug repurposing is to find new use of existing drug that has been used for humans for some times for the approved indication. One of the best example is a drug called Viagra. It was originally being developed for the treatment of hot-related chest pain, but it was repurposed for the treatment of erectile dysfunction, which was kind of a side effect back then. So upon COVID-19 outbreak started, we figured that drug repurposing is the feasible, if not the only one, options for COVID-19. So what you do is to screen over 1,500 FDA approved drug for potential antiviral activity against the SARS-CoV-2. The drug discovery, as you can see here, drug discovery is a long process, typically taking more than 10 years, starting from drug discovery to 3 phases of clinical trial prior to final FDA approval. By contrast, drug repurposing can be done as short as 6 months or so. So FDA-approved drug has been used for human already, and so safety test in human subject can be skipped. So drug selected from your lab, from the screening, can go to directly phase 2 and phase 3 trial.
Sorry, Dr. Ryu, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second since we have a little bit of a technical issue. It seems like you're not sharing your own slide, but that we have our set of slides here. So if you can let us know. if you can let us know when to advance the slide, we'll do so.
Okay, okay. So do you see the slide, what I see? Phenomic screening? Do you see slide 4?
Yes, slide 4.
Okay. May I continue?
Yes, please.
Specifically, Institute Past Korea built around what you call phenomic screen technology, which is essentially cell-based image analysis. So what you do is to set up cell-based model for the disease, and then adapted cell-based assay to well plate, 384 well plate for high throughput analysis. Then treat the cell with a chemical library or drugs in this case, and analyze the drug's effect by image analysis. So phenomic screening technology allows us rapidly identify drug with a desired property. So from screening over 1,500 FDA-approved drugs, we identify over 20 drug candidates which exhibit antiviral activity comparable to remdesivir, which was reference drug back then. The first drug which is already in phase 2 trial in Korea starting April 1, is cyclinoxide, which is a drug for asthma inhalation. And the second drug is niclosamide, which is an anti-parasite drug. And clinical trial of niclosamide will be expected to start in July. So I wish that this FDA drug could help to end COVID-19 crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryu. We apologize for the issue with the slides. One question that I have for you is that one of the most difficult and elusive characteristics of COVID-19 is that it's so contagious, even if in its asymptomatic stages. And one concern is that by the time a patient experiences symptoms that are severe enough that they seek medical treatment, that there may already be significant damage done to their respiratory system. How are you kind of factoring this in when weighing the benefits of development of drugs versus vaccines, for instance?
The drug we develop is aiming for mild pneumonia patients, not for severe patients. And for severe patients, you have to do something else. And this is to control viral replication. So this drug may not be effective for severe pneumonia patients.
I see. So then how can we get people to seek treatment so that they can take these drugs early on in their the progress of COVID-19?
And these two drugs are in clinical trial in Korea, but it has not been approved for COVID-19. So you have to wait at least several months to come. But the challenge we have is that as the COVID crisis subsides in Korea, we are running out of patients for the clinical trial, unfortunately, or fortunately, if I say.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll return to these questions when we have our group discussion. So next we'll move on to Dr. Kristen Beck. You can begin when you're ready, and if you can share your slides directly in Zoom, that would be great.
Sounds good. Is that coming through okay now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Hi, my name is Kristen Beck. Thank you so much for the introduction, and also an immense thank you to the organizers of this conference, bringing together information of this nature and content in the digital format is not easy, so big thank you there. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the platform that we're working on for rapid analysis of SARS-CoV-2 genomic content. And I'll give a little bit of background first. So I come from IBM Research. I always like to explain that because we're the part of IBM that gets to do all the really fun, crazy, wild, moonshot style kind of analysis. And we think of this as really a growth engine for the company, but we work on so many different things. There's actually a tremendous amount of people in the life sciences, epidemiologists, and so forth. And as it relates to the COVID-19 task force and our response, we've brought together this capability that I'll share with you now. So just one more item of background here. So as you think about COVID-19 and the genome SARS-CoV-2, which is the genome of the virus itself, globally, people have been sequencing around the clock. Really, there's been a ton of efforts, of course, around epidemiological modeling and modeling the spread. But when we think about how we're actually going to fight this virus, to slow it, to kill it, to give us those treatments necessary, the answers really reside within the genome itself. The plot on the left-hand side is the data that has been collected over the last several months. I think just this week alone, or as of this week, we're just shy of about 10,000 genomes in total for SARS-CoV-2. And this is a huge global effort on this. At the same time, too, while we're rapidly generating this data, the virus itself is mutating. It mutates typically about twice per month, and that yields previously unseen variants. Some of those may be easier to kill, some of those may be harder to kill, but it's a moving target, right? So being able to automatically process this type of data very quickly is hugely important as it relates to developing those health interventions necessary. As I mentioned, within the genome, the answer lies for all of the molecular targets that will be used to develop antivirals, vaccines, and rapid diagnostic tests. So what we've done is put together this data platform, and really up until the last probably 2 months or so, this has been really focused on bacteria, stemmed from the work that we've done in the microbiome. But what we did is we built this data platform in a way that's different than many others, in that all of the biological entities from genotype to phenotype are pre-computed and readily connected in a many-to-many relationship, and really have connected over 300,000 different data types, or I'm sorry, 300 million different sequences across these different biological entities. When we think about the platform itself, of course, automated ingestion of data is key, especially as it relates to a global pandemic. But we've also put forth capabilities on top of this where you can search data in milliseconds, returning tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of results for your specific research area of interest. Maybe that's the spike glycoprotein involved in host cell invasion or anything of that nature. The connections are pre-computed, and we surface this data through a web interface for people who are more on the biologist, microbiologist side, and then also with a significant developer toolkit, including a Python SDK, Docker containers, and REST services, so that people can work with this type of data in their own compute environment and then in their own workflows, with the goal of really accelerating research. As it relates to COVID-19, we realized that we had this capability for this genomics data platform, and we said, how can we help? What can we as IBM and what can we as researchers do to help in this global pandemic, global public health threat? And the answer was we need to extend this platform to annotate viral data. And I think it was a Tuesday afternoon, and we found a corpus of SARS-CoV-2 genomes, and I shared that with one of our lead engineers. And by the next morning, when we were drinking our coffee, the data was annotated, queryable, easy to access. And as I mentioned, this contains all of those molecular targets for health interventions, antivirals, vaccines, and diagnostics. So after we realized that this was actually really helpful, we then went and then made that even bigger. So we went and we pulled over 25,000 viral genomes from GenBank. And then as I mentioned, over 10,000 genomes of SARS-CoV-2 as of to date. So this contains all of the genomes associated with the pandemic itself, but also neighboring or homologous other pandemic viral information for SARS and MERS. So the data itself is now updated around the clock. We pull in the latest data every couple of days. Our servers are churning on generating all of the genes, proteins, and functional domains. The counts for COVID-19 are shown here at the top. So I think I pulled these numbers maybe last Thursday. So 9,200 genomes, over 9,800 genes, 7,700 proteins, and over 11,000 functional domains. These downstream components each represent unique sequences as well. So those are the specific variants. As it relates to our IBM's response for COVID-19, we now are making this free to the global research community for people working on COVID-19. So if you're looking at the genomic side of things, you can go to ibm.biz/functional-genomics and request access. So we've got information there about the data, about the platform and what's available, and you can request access to work with this for your research interests. This is kind of a bit of a teaser of some of the data. So this is plotting the total number of protein occurrences by their distinct protein occurrences. So these are unique sequences on the y-axis. And we see already variants emerging in this data that are changing the protein sequences as it relates to the virus. And that indicates the shifts for those molecular targets. So I think I'm a minute or so over time, but I will just say thank you again so much for the organizers. If you're interested in working with this type of data and the analytics that we're building out, please check out ibm.biz/functional-genomics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kristen. The one thing about this virus is that given that it mutates typically around twice a month, and there are already numerous known variants of the virus, from the data that you have analyzed so far, or your team, do we already know some relevant differences across the variants in terms of their symptoms or contagiousness, or what makes them responsive to treatment?
That's an excellent question. So I, off the top of my head, don't know the direct answer to that. What we're doing as the platform is to try to surface this data to indicate what some of those predominant variants are. So you can already see that, for example, specific proteins are going to have a faster mutation rate than others. Some may be more conserved. And then when you think about those molecular targets, those conserved proteins may be a better target, for example. The patient prognosis information, we aren't able to resurface that because of privacy restrictions in that. So it's a little harder to tie that directly together. There are some repositories that are available for this, but it's kind of a join basically that you would have to do on the data to get that information out.
Thank you. We'll talk about issues of privacy when we have our group discussions. So for now, we'll move on, but I do have further questions for you going forward. For our last speaker, we have Professor Shin, who is here on stage. If you can start when you're ready.
Hello, I'm Jinwoo Shin from KAIST. My educational background is mathematics, and I joined KAIST 2013, and since then I have working on AI, in particular machine learning. So instead of introducing my detailed research, I'm going to briefly overview how AI and machine learning can be useful to fight against COVID-19. In the recent 5 years, machine and deep learning have demonstrated remarkable performance in various AI tasks, including image classification, speech recognition, and reinforcement learning, such as AlphaGo. To obtain a machine learning or AI algorithm, it is necessary to have big data and software, such as algorithms model and hardware, such as graphic processing unit, to train the model given the data. The goal of machine learning to optimize and enhance the human's prediction or decision by analyzing the massive data. In particular, it is much faster than human, often more accurate and reliable for decision making. Therefore, it can significantly accelerate humans' efforts for timely fight against COVID-19. I'm going to introduce 4 types of applications where AI and machine learning can be useful to fight against COVID-19. There should be more. Policy making, and pharmacy, and medicine, and social distancing. First, AI and machine learning can help policymakers by predicting confirmed cases and fatalities, for example, by early warning from AI prediction or helping which policy is effective for controlling spread of COVID-19. tons of COVID-related documents can be also analyzed to help decision makers. As a more concrete example, Blue Dot Company located in San Francisco predict spreading of COVID-19 already in December 19th and set an early alarm. So in the last month, the White House encouraged AI researchers to analyze tons of articles for better policy against COVID-19. AI also can accelerate drug discovery and design for finding vaccines and cures for COVID-19, which often might take more than a decade without AI. As a more concrete example, in a few weeks ago, IBM offers AI tools to boost COVID-19 for COVID-19 treat discovery. Deep learning-based model by ICTOS and SRI International was proposed to design novel molecules to combat COVID-19. AI-based diagnosis and prognosis and chatbot system also can help critical patients quickly and lessening doctor's burden. As a more concrete example, the Korean startup Buno developed AI solution which helps diagnosis of COVID-19 using lung image. The Israel company Clue also claimed to identify severity of COVID-19. US CDC used Microsoft AI chatbot system to screen people who are potentially infected with COVID-19. Finally, AI can also help preventing spread of COVID-19 by social distancing. For example, AI robot can perform medical tasks and reduce human contact. As another example, Seoul City utilized AI calling system to monitor people in COVID-19 self-quarantine. AI and machine learning is not something new, but AI and machine learning for COVID-19 is what we never experienced before. To win such a timely fight, I think global cooperation is very important because it allows to build a bigger data set and more AI and machine learning expertise, which are essential for their success. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Shin. My question for you is a bit more general. So, of course, not all AI algorithms are alike, and there is some controversy, sometimes political, over whether some predictive models of COVID-19 out there are actually reliable. So as someone who is an expert in this field, when it comes to the kinds of serious decisions that can have very large impact on the entire world, when making those kinds of decisions, what objective measures can guide our confidence in one model over another?
That's a good question. So, of course, you can try and test which model is better in the real world or building some testing data set, but this is sometimes risky and expensive and impossible. So instead of choosing one model, you can aggregate decisions of multiple models. So possibly by estimating confidence level of the model. So for example, you can ask some question to one model, and if the model say, okay, my confidence is low, or I don't know about the question, you can go to the second model. Until you find the model, confidence level is high, and they say some the answer. So to measure confidence of each model, you can maybe utilize the recent advanced technique in Bayesian learning or ensemble learning in the machine learning technique. And I think those directions of aggregating smartness of multiple models instead of choosing a single decision of a single model is better, yeah, and more right way to go.
I think that it would be really helpful if people who are not in the field could have some way of becoming kind of a little bit more literate, so that when we read about these kinds of models, we can also, have an opinion about whether we believe something or not. I mean, in these days, that seems really important to have the lay people also be literate. Do you have any advice for how other people can kind of make these judgments?
Yeah, so judgment by some, even some by expertise to say which model is better is not even easy. So I recommend to use some AI technique to say which AI is better. So that's my recommendation. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, so given the fact that we're kind of late on time, let's kind of bring this discussion back to the group. From all of your individual presentations, it's clear that the work that all of you do relies heavily on the fact that there is transparent and accurate information out there, and of course a lot of it. In your own experience in your respective fields, how open and straightforward has it been for you to gain access to the data that you need for your work? Would you like to start, Dr. Ryu?
People talking about some kind of conspiracy of things of that kind, but I don't think there's any evidence that the kind of things. And as far as the concern, the data is available. People begin to cooperate more openly nowadays. I can see the very friendly atmosphere between countries. I don't see any negative things. It's people talking about. People can talk about what they want to talk about, but I think that doesn't help much.
Okay, thank you. That's actually very comforting to know. What about you, Dr. Beck?
Yeah, I would say I think the scientific community has really answered the call, and they've come together and trying to do the best that we can to get something out as quick as possible and try to help in this way. And I think on the genomic and the bioinformatics side, I think that's certainly the case. It's typically a requirement as far as publishing to release any sequence data you're working with. And now at this stage, we're just releasing it even earlier. Basically, as soon as it's hot off the machine, you would do some in-house analysis, but then push that out to help, especially, as you think about certain countries just have higher throughput of sequencing, of course, right? But you see that, there's, I don't even know off the top of my head, but over 50 different countries that have submitted sequences to GSI-IF2020, and it spans all continents. And so that really helps get the data out there quickly. And also, as it mentioned, I forgot to mention in my presentation actually, but it ties into the most recent speaker about AI, and that this data is exactly what we need for gold standard data, for good training data, to support in that nature.
Thank you. What about you, Professor Shin?
So I like to point out some different aspects on machine learning techniques. So, of course, bigger data and larger amount of data is always desired for higher accuracy, but there are also recent techniques, emerging technique in deep learning and machine learning literature to use a small number of data but achieve high performance. So if really privacy or those kind of is really an issue, you can go also go that direction. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. A related question is about the availability of data and sharing data internationally without violating issues of privacy, and also without losing support from private sectors in terms of profit and whatnot. Could each of you make a comment about that? Maybe we'll follow the same order, starting with you, Dr. Ryu.
And I initiated by Cold Spring Harbor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And people begin to share their data, people publication. For instance, BioReceive, Medical Receive, Chem Receive. This is a new thing. And people, in the past, people are not willing to share their data with others, people publication. But now they, as long as they have data, they upload their data. They are willing to share the data prior to publication. They are not afraid of competition. I think this is a new trend, and this is really open science, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too.
Yeah, Kristen?
I agree with that too. Yeah, I think it definitely is a big shift into more open science. I think as you think about moving data internationally, there's always going to be export controls, import controls, those type of things, as well as important concerns and provisions for individual privacy as well. And I know that in our preparation of this release, we had a lot of calls with legal, but just making sure that, you know, we're doing the right precautions to secure data, only distributing what we're able to, those type of things as well. And I think it's something to make sure to keep in mind and to do due diligence on. But I do see that the research community itself is really pushing into that open science, pushing more so into that open science space.
Excellent. What about you, Professor Shin?
This might be not a good answer, but there are some another way to train a model without accessing data, but accessing another model. So they may be another way to go avoid the privacy issue and make information and treatment available for everyone. Yeah, I think.
Thank you. I think we are living through a turning point in human history, and on this Earth Day, today's April 22nd, it makes me really hopeful to hear these responses from the three of you. I think it makes me much more optimistic than I was going into it. Given the sake of time, I would like to kind of give each of you a couple of minutes to make your final remarks. Starting with you, Dr. Ru.
I think the crisis in English means the danger, but crisis in Chinese later means that wigi means opportunity and crisis. I think that young people in the audience see this crisis as an opportunity for their career. I'm trying to keep them optimistic for their futures. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Kristen.
Very well put. Yeah. Oh goodness, I didn't come prepared with concluding statements. I think that you know, of course, thank you to the organizers. I think I've been tremendously impressed with seeing the research community come together, and really there's still much hard work in front of us. And so from the genomic side and developing these antivirals and better diagnostics, those type of things, there's still much to be done in this. So the research community is open and welcoming, and for data scientists and even disciplines where that may not be their classical training, you know, if you are interested, that this is an opportunity for collaboration to come together to help humanity.
Thank you. Professor?
So I personally think recent success of AI is mainly due to big data and smart people. So AI for COVID-19 is something new, and if more data is available and more smart people around the world are working on that problem, then maybe we are ready for the next virus, COVID-20.
Thank you all very much. I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, and sometimes the light at the end of the tunnel is not visible, but I hope that, you know, we can go on and tell our grandchildren about, you know, that year in which this very strange virus brought the world together and made, you know, strengthened open science and communication. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today. Now for the closing remarks of our forum, I would like to introduce Professor Jung-ho Kim, the director of the KAIST Global Strategy Institute and the mastermind of this event.
Light on.
Dr. Kim is at the podium.
Yes, you can. I
Yeah.
start? Okay. Thank you. Currently, the world is undergoing an unprecedented crisis by the coronavirus pandemic. this disaster is not confined to a limited number of individuals or any single country. It is very important to know that nations around the world should gather together and engage in international collaborations to combat this COVID-19 pandemic. Such endeavors should span across a vast array of fields and subjects, including politics, economics, industries, jobs, medicine, science and technology, and education. I strongly believe that foundations laid in this forum today are vital requirements for successful solutions for our global future society. This forum will be a valuable resource for all of us keen to envision the world during and after the COVID-19. The forum today took place in an online format so that people around the world can participate safely from their office and home. I surely believe that speakers' presence and speech today had highlighted the significance of the global collaboration against COVID-19 crisis and our efforts to fight against it. At the final moment, I would like to appreciate all the efforts given by the forum chairs, committee members, speakers, forum staff, and all the participants. Your contributions are unforgettable and will be very valuable. GSI at KAIST will have upcoming forums to focus on the critical issues such as political, economic, medical, environment, education, science and technology, and artificial intelligence, as well as democracy, digital divide, and social issues. I'm looking forward to meeting you again at the incoming next forum. Thank you very much.